Hi, this is Dan Gilvazan, and you're listening to the Geekcast Radio Network.
Jazz here, and I am so digging the Geekcast Radio Network.
Cliff Jumper, commence countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now, Toycast. Oh, yes. Listen in to the only toy podcast you will ever need.
Hello and welcome to an all-new generation of Toycast as we get the origins of any and all toy fans that we can. I'm, of course, Steve, Joe, and Mike. Today's featured guest is someone who you may or may not have heard yet, depending on the release of this episode and the release of his other episode, but it is Dan from Rock Nerd Radio. Hello, sir.
Hey, Mike. How's it going, man?
It's going. Sometimes I wish it would stop, but it's going. So today, it's time we started talking toys here on Toycast, and this is the Origins 42 questions, all about toy collecting and kicking it right off the bat. And the questions, they start difficult here, and they only get even more difficult after the fact. What is or was the first toy you remember having as a kid?
Oh, man. I definitely remember having some Transformers as a kid. I want to say the first one that was like mine and mine alone in terms of like not sharing with my brothers was a character named CinderSaurus, who was a Sparkacon, I think they were called. He had like a wheel with some flint on his belly, and you'd roam along, the table, and sparks would shoot out of his mouth. So I think that was my first like toy that I remember having.
Interesting.
I mean, aside from like the obvious like baby toys and stuff, but that was like the first like action.
Yeah,
figure.
I mean, like, so when I did my episode back in episode 113 of the show, I said something like, well, if we're talking about what I really first remember, it's, those play school toys. It's like the Fisher-Price color-changing flashlight or, a board game or something. But yeah, right. I mean, like, action figure, that kind of thing. So was there a particular adult who was supportive of you playing with toys as a kid? Was there anyone who was unsupportive?
That's a good one. So my grandmother and one of my aunts were very cool with giving me stuff that I wanted action figure wise, even until like my early teens. Whereas I think I have a father. I love my dad, but he's very sports oriented. He's very, he's a car guy. So I think he was kind of hoping that I would stop with the action figures and lean towards sports and cars like my older brothers did. And that never really happened. So I don't want to say that my family was unsupportive, but every now and then, like I'd come home from Toys R Us and my dad would be like, oh, another one,
I mean, I hear starting lineup is coming back, so I mean, there's always that. I had a ton of starting lineup when I was a kid.
I remember those. My brothers had a bunch of the starting lineup guys.
Yep. No Yankees, though. Nope, not doing it.
I feel like they were more football. I feel like my brothers had more of the football ones than the baseball ones.
Right, yeah. See, I only ever, like, I know starting lineup had done them all. But I only ever had the baseball and basketball ones, because between the Red Sox and the Celtics, it's like, say what you will after, and I know baseball trades in sports happen, but I'm sorry. Roger Clemens at that time going from the Red Sox to the Yankees was just like, I'm dead as a kid inside. Like, stop it. Don't even. Anyway. What types of toys were your favorites to play with? So, action figures, play sets, vehicles, that kind of stuff.
Little bit of all of that. I liked Transformers as a really young kid, and then I eventually got back into that. But I had a lot of the Marvel superhero figures, and then eventually X-Men was the big line. There was a Spider-Man line, Iron Man, Fantastic Four, all that. So I liked those figures, and then if I could get a playset or a vehicle, I was more than happy to have it. I had some of the X-Men Danger Room and the Marvel Superheroes Training Center. So bases that kind of made sense, but then there were definitely some vehicles that I had that didn't quite make sense. I remember I had a Spider-Man dragster at some point. I don't know why he needed that, but he did,
I mean, the man can swing on webs. Why you need a car?
Right, exactly. But I had
you got your web swinging license when you got bitten by the spider. You don't need to go to spider school or whatever.
Right. But I had the Blackbird for the X-Men. I had the Sentinel.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
So I had the stuff that really made sense, and then I feel every now and then an aunt or somebody would be like, I don't know what to get him. Here, Spider-Man car. There you go.
Oh boy! So you mentioned that. Next question is, what were your favorite childhood toys that really stood out more than the others? So you have this whole, let's just say you have a whole room, your whole bedroom filled with toys. What is the one corner of the room that sticks out more than the rest?
So as I said, especially, in my, in elementary school age, it was definitely the Marvel stuff, but there's a couple really special ones that really stuck out. I had a Transformer. It was a Pretender. If you knew what those were.
Oh yeah.
I had a Pretender called Bugley. I still have him, and that was something my grandmother gave to me, and that was always a really special one. And then after she passed, that he just became more special. So he's always kind of been on permanent display in my room or display room, whatever I have. And then aside from that. I as I said, I really like those Marvel figures. So I had the first Cable that they put out. That was a big one that I always remembered being a really special to me kind of figure. And the second Wolverine, it was Wolverine 2, but it was the tiger stripe costume as he appeared in the cartoon. That was another one of my really favorite ones.
Cool.
Yeah,
very cool. Very cool.
I still have that one too. So.
Yeah, I'm just now looking at Bugley, and oh boy.
Yeah.
What a character.
Oh yeah. Well, it's one of those. It was one of those very small child things where I would bring it to my grandmother's house, and she'd answer the door, and I'd hold it behind my back, and then I'd go rah, and she would go, oh, get that away, and she always played into it, and so that made me super happy. But then as I grew up, I was like, oh, such happy memories with my grandmother, so I'd never let go of him. And when she passed, it was one of those things I was very close to my grandmother. So when she passed away, I remember looking at it, in my room, and that kind of, after a while, it made me smile again. So it's some good stuff.
Yeah, very cool, very cool. So I'm on the TF Wiki looking at this character and looking at the image of the toy, and I'm looking at, and TF Wiki, if you don't know, or most people know of this website.
Oh, yeah.
But they often put various captions under the photos, and for the official character image, it says, "Insects don't have politics. They are very brutal. No compassion, no compromise. We can't trust the insect." Well, yeah, that's and part of his bio. Bugley functions only to control and dominate others. That's the first line. I'm like, okay, then. Well, what a character you had as a kid.
Oh, yeah.
If only your grandmother knew that. Do you prefer the label of action figures, dolls, toys, or other labels?
I go with action figure, but then the one I started saying recently to make myself sound like a high society member is high-end collectibles. That's what I go with. But action figures, collectibles, things like that. My wife, when we started dating, called them dolls, and me and all my friends, simultaneously were like, no, you don't do that.
Yeah, and that's kind of when you got to take her to toy school and say, no, anything that's under 12 inches, anything that's 11 inches to 2 inches, that's an action figure. Anything that's 12 inches and taller, that's a doll. With the exception of Funko Pops, because 10-inch Funko and 10.5-inch Unicron, they are action figures, even though, and I said this on an episode recently, but I may say it in the future, So GameStop and Funko and exclusives and conventions and whatever else, this summer one of the shared exclusives was a 10.5-inch Funko Pop Unicron based on the HasLab $600 toy.
Yep.
I'd rather spend $40 for a Funko Pop to get the same damn thing without having to worry about where I'm going to put this giant thing that I don't have any money. You know what I mean? So, but I looked at it and I took a picture of them back to back because I have the 10. I don't buy the jumbo pops all that often. These are the only two I will probably ever have, unless somehow they do a jumbo Alf, which they don't even have a regular Alf yet. But anyway, I digress. The only half inch, the half inches for Unicron is because of his horns. You cut the horns off the figure, it's 10 inches. And I'm just like, oh God, Funko. He's supposed to be the Chaos Springer. He's supposed to be the destroyer of everything. Make him 12 inches. Make him, I don't know, whatever. Anyway.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to spoil it for later. You might get into something later. So
Okay.
I won't say it now, but go ahead.
All right. Good guys or bad guys? Which toys were your favorites to play with the most?
I mean, because I was the kid who would have elaborate storylines when I was playing with my X-Men, like Apocalypse and the Juggernaut are teaming up, and, the available team today is Wolverine, Gambit, and Cyclops, because those are the figures I brought with me wherever I went, or something like that. So I definitely played with both equally. There were ones that always kind of stuck out as being more of a favorite than other ones. I think now looking back at it, I like the villain characters more, just because you don't seem to quite get as many in toy lines. There were always, if you look at like a case breakdown of an action figure, you would have 5 or 6 heroes and then 1 or 2 villains. And it always kind of bothered me that, you'd have four good guys against 1 bad guy, and it was always just like, oh, come on, like they need more here. Every wave had a Wolverine, but not every wave had a Magneto.
Yeah, and I think again, because for the listening audience, I am producing Toycast way ahead in advance, and episodes are all out of order and everything else. So half the stuff I've probably said already said, but I think that's because they don't want kids looking at, like, yes, you need to teach your children, if you have kids, especially back then in the 80s, without internet and without whatever, like, I didn't even know who, I know what the Pretenders are, but I had never heard of Bugley, so the first thing I do is I go, oh, he's a Decepticon, or he's a bad guy, okay, oh, he's that kind of bad guy, okay, great, like, but you don't really want to have, like, yes, you're right, the good guys always outnumbered the bad guys, except in certain cases. I think Mask always released fairly, they had an equal number of good guys and bad guys on either side. They never, I don't ever think, yeah, I don't know. But yeah, you're right. You always want to check out the bad guys just to see what their side of the story is.
Right.
Okay, so I mentioned this earlier, but did you have what is or was your favorite toy vehicle or playset?
So I'll give you both a vehicle and a playset. The other thing, and I hadn't mentioned this yet, the toy line that I absolutely fell in love with as a kid was Secret Wars, and that was something that my brothers had, and they kind of, gave to me as they grew out of toys. So they had the Tower of Doom. And so when I played, that was like the bad guy base. So that was my favorite playset of all time, because it was just like this menacing looking tower with guns all over it and stuff. And it had an elevator and secret compartments and a jail cell. So like, I loved the Tower of Doom. That was my favorite playset ever. But when it comes to vehicles, probably the X-Men's Blackbird, because, it was in the show, it was in the comics, it could fit 3 people. And that was, again, if I was going somewhere and, like, my mom said, all right, you can only take a couple figures with you, like, I'd throw 3 X-Men in the Blackbird, and I'd be like, all right, and then a couple villains, and now I got my toy for the day,
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, those vehicles, man, they, and that's one thing we'll get into way later in this episode as we get to more modern stuff, but vehicles then were outrageously awesome. Vehicles now...
I feel like they're hard to do now if you want them to look good with the 6-inch scale, like a lot of toys are, So
Yeah,
even back then they looked kind of silly with the 5-inch, driver, but
yeah.
they could get away with it. Now I feel like in the age where these fans are looking for like hyper realism, it'd be hard to make that work. If they were going to put out an X-Men Blackbird jet for Marvel Legends, it's going to be 3.5 feet long,
Yeah, and that's why you have these companies like NECA, like Super 7, that do these. Like, I know Super 7 has their Ultimates lines for various licenses, and it's basically, like, I just looked at several of the new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles ones that they're doing as Ultimates, and I looked at the Shredder, and I'm like, holy crap, that's the 80s Shredder, except it's a modern design. But literally, it has the purple flowing cape, has the purple mask. Luckily, he has an alternate head that is his full Shredder metal helmet head. But yeah, that thing is $55. I don't get it. I get it, but I don't get it. We'll talk about that way down the line as far as price goes.
Yeah, price is definitely a factor these days. So.
Oh, yeah. Did you and your friends ever pretend with your toys that you had? By this, I mean, do you say, I'm going to be this character, and you can be that? Like Dan can be the Coke bottle top, and Dan's best friend can be the piece of glass, or any of that kind of stuff.
I mean, yeah. When in terms of like playing with our action figures, absolutely. I had said we would have elaborate stories, and I had a good, because it was really the only thing I was interested in getting as a gift as a kid was like Marvel figures. So, I would have these figures, and, my friend would come over, and he was the same age as me, and we would, he would bring his figures over, and, like he'd pick up Wolverine, and I'd pick up Magneto, and then, he'd swoop in with Iron Man, and then, I'd have, Fin Fang Foom or whoever, go in and fight that. So we'd be trading off, and then sometimes he'd be like, oh, I'm going to play with these two guys over here, and I'll be, okay, I'll play with my two guys over here. We would have like the floor covered with figures, and yeah, of course, my brothers had He-Man toys, so Skeletor would be like, I'll get you yet, things like that. So
I'll get you, He-Man. God, I can't do that anymore. I know several different people that do good Skeletor voices. What features define a good toy to you? How true does the item feel in comparison to the source material likeness?
That's a good question. It came to a point, and I don't remember when I started feeling like this, but at some point I got over like the gimmicks of action figures. Like the first Gambit figure to come out, like he had you'd press a button on his back and he had a spring-loaded leg, so he would like kick. But I hated it because it wasn't, like it stopped him from being able to pose and mess around with him. There'd be characters who, they'd press a button and they'd like power punch or something, but they wouldn't have any articulation otherwise. So at some point, I just wanted figures that had like the basic, several points of articulation and looked like the character they were supposed to look like. At some point, Toy Biz back in the day started getting kind of crazy. They had like Electro Spark Spider-Man. You'd be like Spider-Man, this day glow green costume. Like, why do I want this? This doesn't look like Spider-Man to me. So I was, and now especially with like Marvel Legends and Transformers, I look for something that looks like the source material. That if I put it on my shelf, I know it's that representation of that character. And maybe they have some cool accessories, but I'm done with like play gimmicks. Obviously, transforming with Transformers is a gimmick, and I want that in there. But other than that, I don't need like spring-loaded, heel missiles or something. I'm just looking for the character that's going to look like it on my shelf.
Yeah, there's a huge difference in a toy line being something that turns from one thing to another. Like, I'm going to say this because they came first, even though Transformers are better. Like GoBots, like Transformers, like anything like that. But Transformers, you had essentially two toys in one for one low price now at whatever store kind of thing. That's different. That's not like, and obviously over the nearly 40 years now, yes, plenty of Transformers have had gimmicks, but the art of transforming is not a gimmick. It's a built-in construct of the toy. Whereas, like you're talking about, like Battle Armor He-Man, you could like I'm going to say it this way, and I know it's going to sound creepy, folks. we are explicit around here, but you could rub his chest and his symbol, same thing with Battle Armor Skeletor, his symbol would change from normal chest
to being like
battle
damage.
to battle damaged. You could press a button on the back of Tongue Lashor to have his tongue stick out at everybody, kind of thing. Those are gimmicks, and gimmicks wore off for me very early.
Right. And, it's interesting that you say He-Man, because as a kid, as I said, my brothers had He-Man figures. The gimmick to He-Man never existed to me. It was part of the character, and I was fine with that. But that line ended. And, when it ended, it ended. It wasn't like, okay, we're going to keep trickling figures out. Like, unlike Toy Biz Marvel and Transformers, there's always been some iteration of that. But, Transformers is just as guilty as having gimmicks, too, aside from the transformation, which is kind of part of it.
Absolutely.
Like in Cybertron, they had the Cyber Planet keys, and you'd stick this thing in something, and a sword would pop out, or they wouldn't be able to transform without their mini-con. I didn't want that. I want the bare bones, I can do this without any other accessories, because if you lose that stuff, you're out of luck,
Yeah. The only time, and Transformers, I have said for years now, I've said it a little bit more loudly the last couple of years, I just went on that whole diatribe about the whole transforming thing. It's part of what you get with that initial toy. But then obviously they do add in gimmicks like Target Masters, like Power Masters, like you're talking about with the Cyber Planet keys. The only time I did not mind a gimmick in Transformers that had to have something else to make it work was Power Master Optimus Prime.
I had that one. I still have that one. I love that figure.
Very cool, very cool. Yeah, I love that toy. That toy is amazing.
Absolutely.
So, now this could be as a kid or as an adult, but what does toy packaging have to draw you in? So you go into the toy store, or in today's market, you go into Walmart or Target or whatever else. You go into the toy aisle, you scan the aisle. What's the one thing, a toy package, what's the one thing, because I know Marvel Legends never died, it's still going. What's that one thing that packaging has to have to make you grab it and say, I want this?
Well, I'll start off with maybe the hot button topic on that. I need to be able to see the figure.
Yes.
Hasbro and a lot of other companies now are going with this closed box thing, and it's honestly, I pre-order more off the internet now because I know if I'm ordering directly from Hasbro Pulse, I'm going to get the correct figure. Whereas if I'm buying the new Leader Class Transformer at Target, if that box looks like it's been opened, I don't want to trust it. I don't want to spend my hard-earned money on something that if I open up isn't going to be the right figure, and it's been happening a lot. So I definitely need to be able to see the figure. That is a big part of it for me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And let's just talk about that for a second, because the whole point in this whole window box, open box, closed box thing is they're trying to, no toy company, I don't care which toy company it is, no toy company is going to save the environment
you're producing plastic, action figures. They're not biodegradable. You're more concerned about the packaging. What about the thing that you are actually packaging? It seems like it's like a little Band-Aid to put on to make the people who were crying about it happy. And at the end of the day, it's just kind of stupid, if you ask me.
I mean, seriously, it's like, have you? I assume you've seen Beast Wars at some point or another.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Optimus Primal said it himself. Die-cast construction. It's a lost art. If you can melt down the toy, because die-cast is metal, if you can melt it down, well, then there you go. You don't have to worry. Everybody always says, and we will get to this way down the line in this episode, but everybody, in 30 or 40 or 50 years, you're going to see landfills and landfills filled with Funko Pops because they can't be, recycled or whatever. So, yeah, it's so from window box to open box to closed box, window box is obviously the best because, like you said, you get to see the figure and whatever else. As far as just, I'm not talking about environmentally, but as far as just being able to see the figure, open box was even worse than closed box because
everybody ripping the head off LeBron James or whatever,
oh, jeez. I mean, that's ridiculous. And then closed box is just, like you said, I mean, obviously, if you order online through whichever retailer you want to order through, whether it's Hasbro Pulse, whether it's Big Bad Toy Store, or whatever, you're guaranteed. And yeah, it's crazy. So
yeah, and I don't want this to sound like, I don't care about the environment or anything. It's just I don't see this as the way to for toy companies to beat their chest and be like, look how eco-friendly we're being, because I'm sure there's nothing eco-friendly about the way these things are produced. So
probably not. And no, folks, I mean, make sure you buy closed box because the power is yours.
But going along with this question, aside from the hot button political topic here, I got to see something that's going to make me want to buy that version of the character. Like, I use Spider-Man as an example because he's such an easy example, but they're always putting out another Spider-Man figure. They're always putting out another Wolverine or another Batman or another Superman. If I have my ideal incarnation of Spider-Man on my display shelf, you have to really have something that wows me in order to buy a new one, unless you stick it in like a 2-pack where I want the second figure. But like they recently did that newer buck Marvel Legends Spider-Man on like that vintage card, and that was something that that was enough for me to be like, okay, I can retire my pizza Spider-Man. I'll buy this new one that looks really cool. And then, they're putting out another one that is pinless and it looks neat, but it comes with like a spider-powered Mary Jane and a spinneret. And, it looks cool, but is that really enough for me to be like, oh, I should buy this set? I don't know,
Yeah. And obviously with Spider-Man and let's just say Spider-Man and Batman, because Iron Man, you bring him into this argument and it's all going to be, well, which suit of the week is he going to wear? Which suit of the hour is he wearing? Kind of thing. Because Iron Man has and I know Spider-Man and Batman have all the very I remember to this day Arctic Batman from the 90s and everything else.
Right.
But and with Spider-Man and go ahead.
Well, see, I feel like that's also part of that argument too. Like they can argue that they can put out all these Iron Man figures because it's armor Mark 47. It's this armor, this special armor. Aside from the black costume and maybe like the Ben Reilly costume, how many special Spider-Man costumes are there? There aren't really that many. So with him, you're kind of limited. So they just keep making new versions. I feel, they keep making new versions of the now on this buck, now we're going to do this suit, on this mold, things like that. Whereas Iron Man, you can just put out stealth armor, module armor, Arctic armor, subspace armor, whatever you want to do. Yeah. And with Batman, it gets to me a little ridiculous because McFarlane puts out a Batman in every line now, and it's like, here's Batman in black and gray, here's Batman in blue and gray, here's Batman with a slightly different bat, and it's like, all right, you're getting ridiculous,
Yeah, so let's just take, well, I don't want to say Batman and Spider-Man, but let's just take Bruce Wayne and Peter Parker.
Right.
Okay? Depending on what he has to adapt to, Bruce Wayne can have about as many suits as Iron Man can have. He has specific suits for various things, fine, whatever. That is what it is. Spider-Man, Peter Parker, like you said, other than the black suit, never really changed. But if you widen that to the other, like you said, Ben Reilly, now we've had Miles Morales for years now. We've got
2099.
Yeah, we've got 2099. We've got I almost called her Gwenpool, but that's not, it's Spider-Gwen.
Spider-Gwen, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, it varies, but it's also one of those things where you just and the other thing is, depending on what the homage is to, you have various of these. Like if you want perfect example, because it just recently in the last couple of months, it just re-released to theaters with some bonus footage or something. I don't know.
Yeah, it's something.
No Way Home. You have Toby, Andrew, and Holland. The 3 movie Spider-Men all together. So you kind of have a Spider-Verse there because they all have different universes. Because the other 2 universes didn't matter until Disney bought Marvel.
Right.
They mattered, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah,
it's like,
I hear you.
It's a whole Doctor Strange kind of thing. So yeah, toy packaging, it just depends. It just depends on you look at again, going back to like He-Man, you look at the Masters Classics, the Grayskull green brick box, those were always cool to me, the Masters Classic stuff from about a decade ago or so, because, it's homaging Castle Grayskull, and then you have a bio, you have this, you have that, and whatever else, and it was always nice. But yeah, I mean, there's always like certain, and it depends on which, like obviously we are most likely going down the boys' toy aisles first. Like, but sometimes, if you're in a store, if you move to a new town, you go to the Walmart and you're like, I've never been here before. Let me try it. Oh, this is where the toy aisle starts. Oh, it starts with either preschool or it ends with Barbie or whatever. And somewhere in the middle there is but the boys' action line also translates to various, like there's the action figure stuff, and then there's the like, oh, you want to be this kid that wants to be on like the Power Wheels and the Hot Wheels and the not Hot Wheels, but like the riding like the tricycles and all that and whatever.
Yeah, so, I mean, because it is a wide variety of interests when you look at just the idea of like boys' toys. So, Do you open your toys or do you leave them packaged? If you keep toys packaged, do you have any specific criteria for that? No, I open everything. The only two things that I have in a package is I had mentioned that X-Force Cable, that first Cable figure that came out. I had sold him a couple years ago, and I decided I wanted to try to find one on card that I could put in like a case and leave it frame it on a wall or something. So I do have one package Cable. And a friend of mine, when the second live-action Transformers movie came out, there was a set of Autobots that combined and turned into an ice cream truck. And a friend of mine bought that for Christmas, opened it, repackaged the robots so they were in a compromising position, and added captions, and then repackaged it. And that I have still in a package because it makes me laugh every time I look at it. So...
Wait a minute. You mean to tell me that somebody went out and bought a Skids and Mudflap ice cream truck and made a porno? Who do you know, Alex Braun or somebody? Like, you need to send me a picture of that so I can put that in the post because holy crap, that's amazing.
Yeah, the idea was that these robots are stupid, so we're going to do something stupid with it. And by that time, the movie had come out, and I was like, oh my god, there are these two blatantly racist robots in here. So my friend kind of did it as a goof to be like, stop supporting this terrible live-action franchise. And I don't love the majority of the live action movies. There are a couple that I do enjoy, but I don't buy the live action stuff. I try to stick to G1-esque looking stuff.
Yeah, I only ever at the time when the live action movies were, like you said, 2009, 2010. By the time the second movie came out, I saw it and I was like, ooh, and then I saw the toy version of it after the movie. I was like, oh, I kind of need that. I kind of like it. The only live action movie toy I ever had was Transformers Revenge of the Fallen Ravage. And the only reason why I had him was because the toy decided to use a purple eyeball for his front facing for his eye on his head. And I think I mentioned this to you in the comic episode we did over on the pull bag. My two biggest favorite colors are black and purple. So the toy was black and he had a purple eye. And I was like, okay, fine. That's fine. I don't need to have a toy with Optimus Prime's bits falling all out of him as he transforms. Don't need that. But I'll take the black and purple Decepticitty. That's fine. I don't mind that at all.
Yeah, I still have the first live action movie, Optimus Prime, because I was hyped for the movie to come out when it came out, so I have that. And it used to be real nice with the live action stuff because like Hasbro would do a year or two of classics or universe, whatever they'd call it. And then they'd kind of stop to be like, here's a year and a half of movie stuff. So like a year and a half, I didn't have to buy any Transformers. It was great. Now they're like, oh, wait, we can make money if we just keep putting out like the generation stuff and the movie stuff. So I never get a break anymore. But, so be it.
And, this is a wider discussion for a different show. But you look at what happened 10, 12, 15 years ago this year, that first movie came out.
Yeah.
But, you look at the landscape of everything that went on during let's just say the first three movies. So from 2007 to 2011, you had all this product with the movie, you had all these other product, but we didn't really have any access to, like, we didn't see we didn't see much behind the scenes stuff. Nowadays, there's a Hasbro Fan First Friday or Wacky Wednesday or Mondo Monday or whatever, and they have all these live streams where you have various toy designers and people coming on and explaining and talking to BMAC and specifically the Transformers team, because those are the only ones I know, BMAC and Evan and
Right.
Isabella and Mark and all those people. It's like, oh, this is great nowadays because we actually get to see the figures sort of before. I mean, there are still leaks, and leaks are bad, but we get to see them, like specifically Evan. Evan is usually the one that, oh, I have it right here, let's look at it kind of guy. And they talk through it, and I like watching those because I like actually hearing from. 10 years ago, we didn't hear from the designers. Hell, 20 years ago, we didn't really hear from anybody at Hasbro because it was just like, let's just put out this, whatever. So, but nowadays, we are living in an age where it's like any toy company that does a live stream, it's like, oh, yay, we get to hear from the people who made it. That's awesome.
Yeah. I really like that they do these like live streams now because it brings that nice insight into it.
Yeah, and it's bringing them closer with their fans than ever before.
Right.
So, if as a kid or an adult, you only were allowed to choose one toy franchise to collect from, which one would you choose and why?
Just one, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Are we talking current or what are we talking here?
Most of these franchises have been around 40, 50 years, so you take G.I. Joe, Transformers, He-Man, whatever. You can only pick one. Which one would you choose?
I'd probably still go back to Marvel Legends. That I've been collecting Marvel forever. I remember buying the first wave of Marvel Legends stuff. So as much as I love Transformers, I think I still, if I had to completely cut out one of my some of my collecting ones in favor for another, it would be Marvel Legends would stay.
Very cool. Very cool. As an adult, do you prefer vintage toys or modern toys?
Modern. It's interesting that you bring this up. I had Dan Larson from Toy Galaxy on my radio show a couple weeks ago. And, one of the things that we were talking about was, vintage is fine. There are some people that just want to get the vintage stuff, and that's fine. I'm looking forward to modern engineering. I like having a really good representation of something that I'm passionate about. And, and it's going to be able to pose well. It's going to be able to stand well. So I go with modern. Nothing against vintage. I do have a complete Secret Wars figure line, so I do like that stuff. But I like buying modern stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, and I mention this in almost every episode, is that I remember me in Florida in 1989 with the Rodimus Prime toy from Transformers with, he's got the huge legs and he's got the trailer and he's got the base and all this and all that. Well, now we have Kingdom Commander class Rodimus Prime, and it's like, holy crap, this is the toy I wanted 40 years ago.
Right. Because
that Kingdom Commander class Rodimus is essentially everything the original toy was, but so much more.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And again, there are some people who love the aesthetic of vintage stuff, and you have like Reaction doing like the stuff that looks vintage but being produced now. And there's a market for it and people love it, and that's great, but I'd rather be able to have a really well engineered, like you said, like Rodimus Prime. I had that original Rodimus Prime myself. He could move his arms. This new one, he can move in all kinds of ways. It's I like that.
Yeah, absolutely. What is the one toy you can always play with?
Man, always, huh? I mean, really, because I got some display shelves in my basement man cave area. So anything that's on there that's accessible, I'll just pick up and mess around with. Sometimes it might be a Marvel Legend, sometimes it might be a Transformer. I have other stuff too down there, but it's there is one Transformer that to this day I love picking up and playing with. They did a I think it was during Universe or Classics or whatever, they did a Warpath figure. And even though there have been other Warpath figures since then, I still pick that one up and still mess around with him quite often.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Warpath is awesome.
Oh, yeah.
In almost any incarnation. That guy was so cool.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a cool one. It's like an H-tank, so he transforms in a cool way. I always like that one.
Absolutely. And, not that we want to be negative around here, but there are always some negative questions that we do have to ask. Even though there are always toy lines that people never purchase, are there any that you specifically and purposefully avoid? This can be a toy line, a specific character, etc. So again, it goes back to that toy store question. You go into the toy store, what's the stuff you're not going to get? What's the stuff you're going to avoid completely and don't care about?
Yeah, that's a tough question because through my years of collecting, I've definitely picked up stuff that, I thought I was going to be kind of gung-ho on and then I wasn't. And it kind of varies, from year to year. Like, a friend of mine loves the Masters of the Universe Origins line, and I wasn't going to buy any of that just to save myself some money. And then I really like the Horde. So then a Hordak came out, and I was like, oh, I'll pick up Hordak. And then they did a Mantenna and a Leech and a Mosquito. And, slowly but surely I'm picking up just the Horde. So like it's controlling myself in that way, but I can't even say it's not the whole line. I think at this point, the one thing I don't really pick up is NECA stuff because I know NECA can get expensive. I know it can get sometimes there's some quality issues. Nothing against the company. It's probably one of the only toy lines I haven't picked anything up from ever. So
very cool, very cool. So along the same lines, are there any toys in the past or currently that you wish you had not bought them? Are there any toys that you may have sold that you regret letting go?
Oh, absolutely. So in terms of buying stuff that I wish I didn't, when Cartoon Network started that Thundercats show, I forget how long ago. Not Thundercats Roar. The
No, 2011. I know what you're talking about.
I loved that show, and they were putting out like a 7-inch line of classic 80s Thundercats. They did a Lion-O and a Tigra, and I picked them up. I picked them up right away because I was like, oh man, if this keeps going, we're gonna get the full Thundercats team and all that. And then not only did the line not continue, but with the next release, they shifted them down to 6 or 5-inch scale figures. So the first two were already out of place. So I was like, well, this was a waste. I eventually sold them for, half of what I paid for them, if not less. So that was a big regret. Like I hate when they do when they stall like that. You think you're going to end up getting something and then you don't get anything. But then talking in terms of things that I regret selling, a couple years ago, I was really cutting down on Marvel Legends, and I decided I was only going to keep some characters that really meant a lot to me. And so I was keeping all the X-Men because X-Men's my favorite area of Marvel. But I started selling off characters like Vengeance and Mephisto. I was selling off a lot of the demonic-y kind of characters. I kept Ghost Rider. But, I sold Mephisto because he was a Marvel Select that they haven't reissued and goes for quite a lot of money. And now, the possible next HasLab is a Ghost Rider thing. And part of me is like, maybe I shouldn't have sold Mephisto. That would have been cool to have. But, it happened,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, I don't know. Because my collection now is a lot. So I started I started my toy collecting journey back in 2005. And it lasted till about 2011 until some financial things happened and I had to get rid of it all. But basically from 2005 to 2011, I was buying my childhood back. I was buying all Optimus Prime, all this and all that and everything else. And so from 2011 up until 2016, I was like, okay, well, I'm done with it because this podcast was not around from 2014 to 2019, 2020. Yeah, we just brought it. Oh, it was 7 years, 2014 to 2021. We just brought the show back last year because a buddy of mine, and everybody else listening to the sound of my voice knows this. You don't know this. A buddy of mine who helped me start the show passed away in 2011. And I'm just like, okay, well, let me see if I can keep the show going. It only lasted until 2014, and then I put it on hiatus, and obviously now we're back. But in 2016, like I said, I found Funko. And there are only and I don't even remember what it was, because once I remove them from my collection list in the Funko app, I don't remember what they are. A couple years ago, I sold maybe, I don't know, 100, 200 different Funkos I had at the time. I had like over 300 at that point. Right now, I'm up to about 200 again. But, like, I couldn't tell you what, like, I have no regrets from needing to sell those, because when it comes to Funko, and we'll talk about this way later down the line, I only grab the ones that I absolutely want. So, there is that.
Yeah, I get that. And, in terms of regrets, too, like, I mentioned, regretting selling Mephisto, but there were a bunch of other Marvel Legends at that time when I was selling stuff that I don't regret. I had the Fantastic Four Classics Dragon Man that I found in a hobby store by me when it was first released. I maybe paid $25 for it, which at the time was high for a Marvel Legends. And, that's a character that, I no disrespect towards him, but I just didn't care. So, I sold them for a really nice amount. There's rumors that there's a new one coming out, so I'm glad I sold it before the new one was announced. But, if I tried to hold on to everything, I would never let go of anything, and I'd be drowning in figures. So at some point, I do have to turn around and say, do I still need this one? And that might be, do I still need this, 15th version of Optimus Prime, or am I happy with this one? Or, that's going to change from person to person, but it's something that as I've gotten older, I've had to ask myself, like, do I really still need this one? Do I feel anything when I look at this? If he wasn't on my shelf, would I care?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that kind of plays into the next question, because how large or small is your toy collection? Do your toys take up the whole house, or are they relegated to one room, shelf, or something like that?
So my basement is my display area. It is, like my office, my theater room. It's all that. And, I have a couple bookcases, like DVDs on it, that have some smaller collections, more focused things on there. Like I mentioned the Horde. So the Horde is kind of relegated to a very, to a shelf on a bookshelf. But then there's a wall in my basement that's about 20 feet across that has shelving all over it. And that's where my Transformers and my Marvel Legends are. So there's about 10 feet for Transformers, 10 feet for Marvel Legends. It's shelves that go anywhere from as low as 3 to as high as 4, squares up. And that's where I relegate my stuff. My wife and my wife especially, not that she has anything against my collecting, but she was like, you're not going to have just stuff all over the house. You have to have it displayed nicely, and you have to keep it clean. So that's what I do, and I'm pretty good about it.
Very cool, very cool. How do you keep track of your collection? Do you have a spreadsheet, or do you have a document, or any of that kind of stuff?
That's a great question. I guess I just have some kind of crazy man brain where I can keep track of what I own. I have never walked into a store and gone, do I own this? Like, I know whether or not I have it. I've started toying around with the idea that at some point in my life, I am going to have to make some kind of visual spreadsheet that lists everything, pictures of the figure with their accessories, things like that, because God forbid something happens to me. My wife wouldn't know what half this stuff is, and I would feel bad. I have a number of very close friends who would know it, but having to make them dig through everything and look up pictures online as to what accessory goes with this character if the figure's not holding it in their hand. I really need to try to streamline what I have. I started toying around with the idea that if now as I buy stuff, maybe taking a picture of everything right out of the box and being like, all right, here's what we came with, let's go. That way I know, and maybe even starting doing things like putting maybe waves of figures into like a Ziploc bag, so all the accessories from that wave are together, things like that. But otherwise, like if you brought me into a Target or Walmart and pointed at something, I'd be able to tell you if I have it, don't have it, or if I don't want it. So
that is very, very cool. So you mentioned earlier about your basement and how you display your stuff there, but when I say how do you display your toys, is it more of having them in a specific way? Is there like do you, like you said earlier, you were making, scenes and adventures. Do you have them, like, do you have all the Transformers versus all the Marvel Legends or whatever? You said earlier about, every 10 feet is a new whatever.
So again, it's probably OCD is what I probably have. But the way that my basement shelves are set up is split down the middle. 10 feet to one way is Marvel Legends, 10 feet the other way is Transformers. And like every cubicle is something else. So like, the Transformers will be like season 1 Autobots in this one, season 1 Decepticons in this one, season 2 Autobots, season 2 Decepticons. And that's how, and then like, like maybe, cause as I said, I'm mostly Generation 1 stuff. So then like, I even go into the Japanese stuff. So it'll be a cubicle that has like the Autobots from the Japanese Master Force series and the Decepticons from the Master Force series. So things like that, like that's how I break it down. I try to keep it neat like that. I do have a cube dedicated to just the Dinobots because they're my favorite thing out of all Transformers. And then I have like the big Titan figures on top of the cubicles because they stand well. There's clearance between the shelf and the ceiling. And then with the Marvel Legends, it's kind of groupings that make sense. The X-Men take up the most space out of everything. So the top of a cube set is like the HasLab Sentinel. And then, like, because 90s X-Men were my jam. So it's like the blue and gold team, X-Force, X-Factor, and, the little of Excalibur that we have so far. So, like, that's there. But then there'll be another cubicle that might have, like, Magneto and the Brotherhood. And there might be one that's like, here's the original team, like things like that. And then I'll have, like, Spider-Man with street-level heroes. And then I'll have, like, a shelf that's Spider-Man villains. And then I'll have, like, an Avengers shelf and then, like, an Avengers villain-type shelf. So that, and by doing that, I find it also forces me to question, especially when new stuff is coming out. Do I have a spot for this stuff? Will it display well? Do I need it if I can't figure out where I'm going to put it? So that's kind of help, figure out how I'm spending things.
Yeah, absolutely. That's just, it's just kind of smart. So, all right. If you could only keep one toy from your entire collection, what would it be and why? And basically how I frame this question is, the house is burning down. Every human, pet, whatever is outside and safe. But what's the one toy you'd run back in to save?
Oh man, that's tough. I think it would have to be, if not Bugley, for all the reasons that I mentioned before. Yeah. I have an authentic Generation 1 Transformers Fortress Maximus, and it might have to be that one. That was a oh wow. Yeah, that was when I was going through a master's program, and I said I was going to reward myself for completing the program by getting a Fort Max. So I did. I spent quite a bit on him because he was expensive at the time. Of course, 4 months after I got him, they announced the Encore re-release, so that was fun. But so I have an authentic G1 Fort Max. He's complete, stickers, everything. I'd probably grab him.
Very cool, very cool. On that note, folks, we're going to take a quick break. You're going to hear some ad stuff and whatever else I put in this ad break, and we will be back with the rest of Dan's story in toy collections after this.
Oh, quack! How should I know they'd have a can of shock-repellent bat spray handy? Why, you sniveling sardine!
Are you pompous, puffed-up penguin?
Our friends make peace. Have a shake on me.
A joke a day keeps the gloom away.
What was that universal greeting again? Never mind, I remember. Ba weep grana, weep nitty bong.
Hey guys, it's Rodimus Primal, and be sure to check out my YouTube channel. Join me as I have Transformers discussions, retrospectives, toy reviews, and more. You can also follow me on Twitter at Rodimus Primal, as well as Facebook and Instagram at Rodimus Primal Show. Transform and roll out, and be sure to check out my content till all are one.
Last big party of the summer, folks. Let's go out with a bang.
One of the primary themes of Toycast is that we focus on times past. We are who we are today because of the nostalgic memories and experiences from our childhood. Obviously, we wouldn't be doing this podcast if it weren't for the toys that make us so addicted to nostalgia. Times Past Collectibles in Chicago, Illinois is your primary go-to collectibles store to reclaim the toys that drove those memories and experiences. Specializing in action figures from all of your favorite toy lines like Star Wars, G.I. Joe, He-Man, Transformers, Silverhawks, Ghostbusters, TMNT, Mask, and more, get your dose of nostalgia with a shop run by collectors for collectors. Whether you are looking for loose G.I. Joe Ice Cream Soldier, a packaged Leonardo, recent Star Wars Black Series figures, or an AFA-graded Boba Fett, Times Past Collectibles is bringing you back to your childhood. Visit the shop at 1450 North Ashland Ave in Chicago, just 2 blocks south of Ashland and North Ave. Call the shop at 847-830-1031 or email timespastcollectibles1982@gmail.com. You can also find them on Facebook. Just search Times Past Collectibles because, folks, it's past time that you get your collectibles. All right, folks, we are back here on Toycast episode 158 with Dan from Rock Nerd Radio. Hope everyone enjoyed the commercial break. Hopefully I made it a short one. Try not to make those things too long because people will tune out. All right, questions 21 to 42. Are you ready, sir?
I'm set. I got a soda here with me to give me some energy, keep my throat moistened up, and I think I'm ready to go.
Say it usually when I start recording is when I do the intro, and it's like I either slap myself or I'm like, okay, drink them if you got them or whatever. Kind of, it's like whatever you got to do to get ready for that opening. It's like, All right, question 21. So, question 21 is kind of like the opposite. So, here's the Toy Box Challenge. You get one 18 by 18 by 18 box. The only toys you can keep have to fit in the box. What can you pack into it?
Oh boy, that's tough. I feel like I get to cheat a little bit because of Transformers. They change their size. So whereas Fort Max is like 23 inches tall, if I transform him, he'd be significantly tinier. So I'd probably put Fort Max in there because that's a pretty important one. Oh man, what else would I? Some of my favorite stuff that I would put in if like that was the only box I had, I was going to move or something. I'd say Fort Max. I'm sticking with Fortress Maximus. Probably like a Marvel Legends Ghost Rider with a motorcycle because that could fit in there. It would just be filled with like my favorite Transformers and Marvel Legends type characters. Maybe a couple vintage things that I've had since I was a kid that I've never really learned to let go of. I came across the other day my vintage Thundercats Mumra, the mail-away one, where he was in the Mummy. So I'd probably throw him in there because that's a neat one. If I could fit a full Voltron in there, I'd probably throw in a Voltron. So
I think the only way you're going to fit a Voltron in there is if it's one of those. I don't want to say mini mates, but that's all I can think of. Like one of the more mini, for example, let's just say Jada Toys, just like they've done with their Transformers stuff, they put out a nano metal fig of Voltron where it's like 2.5 to 3 inches and it's die cast and all that. But yeah,
I have a couple different like original Voltrons in my collection. I do have the one that. When the Netflix show started airing, they did like they did the Netflix lines and then they did like the classic lines. So I bought the classic lines on discount because they were getting priced out at places. So I bought them and they I don't want to say transform, but I'm going to say transform. Kind of nicely where they fold up kind of nice to make the arms and the legs and stuff. So if you took Voltron apart and into the individual robots, but then kept them where their arms, or their legs are folded up, it might fit. That might fit in a box. So,
yeah. The only thing I can hear in my head is voice of Neil Ross as Keith from the classic series. Dinotherms. What the fuck is a Dinotherm?
They probably made up so much of what they were saying just to sound like techno space jargon. Infracells up, dinotherms connected, mega thrusters are go.
Yep.
It's sad that sad that I know so much of that.
Yeah. Well, we're all fans, right? I mean, and that's the thing. Like transforming toys or toys that change from one, like that was the '80s, not just Transformers specifically, but I mean, what else are you going to call it? Like, you had, and at least the Lions don't have their own like robot forms. They're just lions that then
combine. Yeah,
combine into this Megazord of. Oops, sorry.
Hey, it's the inspiration for Megazord. So one of the
that's true
for Megazord.
That is very, very true. I remember this day. I was 13 years old. Saw that very first episode back. Oh God! Almost next year is 30 years of Power Rangers. Holy crap!
In the States, at least. I think they've been out in Japan a little longer, so.
Well, yes, but let's face it. I mean, when I say Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, everyone always assumes that it's... Yeah. So, next year is the 30th anniversary of Mighty Morphin of the TV show and everything else. And I remember the first time I saw that Megazord, more so the head than anything else, even though Voltron's head really didn't look like that, but I'm like, hey, that's Optimus Prime and Voltron combined, because obviously the Megazord has a faceplate on it and whatever else, but like, it's very interesting, as long as you can fit one Voltron in the box.
Right. But just going back to Power Rangers real quick, and I apologize for the tangent, but it was a show. I think if next year is 30 years, I guess I was 8 when it came out, so I was in like 3rd-ish grade when Power Rangers hit. And I remember thinking, like, this is like Voltron, but live action. Because, very much Monster of the Week, big robot combined, slice it in half, the end. But I remember, like, trying to get into Power Rangers and really enjoying it. Like, my parents never bought me any Power Rangers toys because they were like, you play with your X-Men, that's fine. But I never, like, and that was something that I kind of let go of as I got older. Like, I didn't stick with Power Rangers. And I have friends who... especially through opportunities like the Lightning collection that Hasbro's doing now, who like just never gave up on it. And like, not that they're like super nerdy and they're not dressing up as the Power Rangers or anything and going to conventions, but like they still have that deep love for it. Where I'm like, I have a deep love for Voltron, but not so much the Power Rangers.
See, so I fully believe, and this is my own personal opinion, if you were born in 1980, which I was, you are equipped to grow up on one section, and then as you get older, you find another. So I was 4 by the time Voltron came out. I was 13 by the time Power Rangers came out. And within those 5 years, there's so much that happens between them, but I could still look at Power Rangers and be like, hey, it's the 90s version of Voltron, even though whatever. And I just absolutely, like, I had latched onto the Power Rangers thing and everything else. And
nice.
I still, somewhere I have a photo. I don't know if it's on Facebook or not, but somewhere I have a photo of myself in 1995, right after the movie premiered. Was it 90? Yeah, it was 95. I don't think I actually saw. I had to wait the 6 months to whatever, how long it took to get to VHS, but I don't remember seeing the movie in theaters, but I remember going to Toys R Us and grabbing that Ninja Falcon Zord, just the Falcon Zord. Forget the like. Look, I don't mind boogieing with the bear, but like, let's face it, Tommy Oliver is where it was at. And anything that Tommy did, like, it was like emulation time. And I have a picture of myself just looking at I'm holding the Falcon Zord and just looking at it, and it's like, it's a long time ago. Oh boy. All right, so here's the. This isn't necessarily the toy version of the DC versus Marvel question, but it's more of, oh boy, either you like it or you don't. And are you a Funko fan?
I don't have an easy answer for this one. I'm going to say no, but not like in a way that I despise them. You know, I have seen people who in their apartment, in their home, they have a wall of just Funko boxes sitting on top of each other. And you know, when they first came out, like I knew some people who were trying to collect every Funko that came out, but then they diversified in so much. They have licenses to every friggin' property out there. I don't think people could keep up. And I'm an opener, like we talked about. So I take them out of the box. I don't like to keep them in their boxes. But I have a few. I have very strict limits on what I'm going to be buying when it comes to Funko stuff, because, you know, I'd rather divert my money towards Transformers and like traditional action figures.
Yeah.
I don't hate them, but I'm not one of the crazy people who's going to stand online for them. And I'm not saying crazy to be like derogatory, but
you're right.
One of my wife's friends, a couple New York Comic Cons ago, you know, my wife and I had the 4-day pass and they only had weekend tickets. And she was like, "Oh, would you mind standing online for the Funko and, you know, at the Funko booth and getting this exclusive for my boyfriend?" And I was like, "Yeah, I can go stand online, no problem." And it didn't click what they were asking. So like first thing Thursday, I went to the Funko booth and there was like no one there. So I got online and somebody was like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "Getting online for the exclusive." And they're like, "Did you pay to have a ticket?" And I was like, "No." And they're like, "Listen, if you want to pay for a ticket, it's over there. And then you have like a 6-hour wait time." And I was like, "Nope, your friend's not getting her Funko. You know, sorry, I'm done." Like, I'm not waiting 6 hours on the line. I'd rather walk the showroom floor. So there are people who will like sell their souls and their whole day to getting like that one Funko. That is not me.
So I am a Funko fan, as many people have heard. I ask this question every episode of the Origins and whatever else. However, it's only for characters that I absolutely feel like I'm not buying. Like, I've said this before. I use this as the best example for me as far as what I'm not a fan of. A couple years ago, Xfinity gave me, "Oh, would you like," you know, it was one of the free HBO Cinemax weekends or whatever. Like, "Oh, free trial, check it out." I'm like, "Okay, sure, fine." So I decided to try, after the show was already over, thank God. I decided to try Game of Thrones, Season 1, Episode 1. I made it through 27 minutes of them walking and doing nothing. So I'm not going to be going out and buying any Funko Pop Game of Thrones characters, is my point. I don't dislike it, I don't like it. I have zero interest in Harry Potter. I'm not going to be buying, so like, you know, but as you're saying this, people with the walls of that technically is me, because I have almost 200 of these things. Half of them are in storage, but even the ones that are in my apartment right now, there's stuff over there, there's stuff on the counter, there's stuff on the floor behind me, because I still haven't fully set everything up yet. I don't have the furniture from out of storage yet. So yeah, but I mean, you know, but there are those people that are like, "Oh my God, Funko, it's the most evil." And there are plenty of things that Funko has done recently that I'm not a fan of, and that's fine and okay. And I'm sure anything I say, anything that's coming out of my voice box here, if someone could, like on Twitter, how you can mute words, I'm sure if someone in a podcast would mute me saying something, they would mute me saying something. But if there was anything I could do to add to YouTube, is to mute every single Funko Soda video, because I do not understand. Funko Pops, I get. Like, I can, okay, so luckily I have some of these things I'm looking at the Marvel 90s Black Cat. So it's styled in the Spider-Man the Animated Series Black Cat. And it's a box. Yes, I can take her out of the box if I want. If I don't want to, I don't have to. But I can see her in the box. The Funko Sodas are soda cans. You can't actually see the actual figure. It's just a drawing of the figure on the soda can.
Yeah.
And I'm, what? And people say that Funko Pops are super deformed, and they technically, I mean, big head, little body.
I was going to say, if you're going to argue that that's not super deformed,
no, but well, right. But I'm saying, like, you know, people will define them as that, And then I look at the sodas and I'm like, that's even more deformed than the Pops. Yeah, so if I could do away with anything, it would be the Funko sodas. I just don't personally get it. And I'm not saying no one else should, like it or whatever. I'm saying for me personally, if I could erase everything Funko soda, that would be great for my own online whatever. So, all right, moving away from Funko. Oh boy. Here's hoping your wife doesn't listen to this show. What was the most money you spent on a toy?
I have the number. I'll tell you, and I will tell you I got it before I met my wife. She's fully aware of this story, basically my rule of thumb, and my wife is fine with this. Is she's fine buying whatever I want to buy as long as I can still pay my half of the mortgage and pay my bills at the end of the day. But no, so a couple questions ago, I talked about getting that G1 Fortress Maximus, and it was before it was reissued and stuff. It was 100% complete, original stickers, amazing shape. It was $1,000. That's the most I've ever paid for a collectible.
Okay.
Yeah, and I know some people are probably sitting there saying that's not that much, and that's fine. I'm lucky enough to where at the time. The job that I had at the time, my bosses knew because I was, as I mentioned, I was going through that master's program. It was a small company that I worked for, very small company, and my two bosses were aware that this was my goal. So when I found one on eBay, I came in, and I was kind of hemming and hawing, oh God, there's one on eBay, I'd like to get it. And so my boss was like, tell you what, I'll get it for you, and then we'll just take some money out of your paycheck every week until you pay back $1,000. So, my boss fronted the money for me, and then, I got paid every 2 weeks. So every 2 weeks, I'd give him $200. So for, 10 paychecks, I was missing, I was down $200, and that paid for it. And I know not everybody has the option to pay off things like that over time. Credit cards being one thing, but this was obviously no interest. My bosses did it, so so doing that made it not hurt nearly as bad because it was just $200 missing from my paycheck, I'll be fine. It's not like I was spending my entire paycheck on stuff. So it worked out real well. And, it's definitely the craziest amount of money I've ever spent on anything. But, with things like HasLabs and stuff, I feel like I'm getting closer and closer again to dropping some big money. So, hopefully I never drop that much again, but that was the most.
Yeah. And to make this even straight, $1,000 for an original G1 Fort Max that's, pretty much complete and all the stickers and everything else for $1,000, that to me is actually a steal, if you think about it. But, so I forget. Oh, I was watching one of these other Funko people on YouTube, and they were talking about what one of the most expensive Funko Pops is, and it is a E3 2018 exclusive, limited to 1,500 pieces of Supersonic. This is actually Shadow the Hedgehog Super, so it's Shadow in yellow and red. Now, keep in mind, this is the standard Funko Pop. This is not a 10-inch. This is not a large. It's the 3-4-inch figure. According to the Funko app, it is valued at $1,170.
Yeah, and and maybe it's just because I don't have the mindset of a Funko collector. And again, no offense, but it's
I know.
The Fortress Maximus is 24 inches, 22 inches tall.
Yeah, no, absolutely,
from a robot to a spaceship to a city. It has play features. It has gimmicks. It has an elevator. It's got this. It's got a head that turns into another robot, and that little robot's head also turns into an even tinier robot. So there's so much play in a Fort Max.
Oh yeah, no.
Whereas to me, a Funko, it's just, especially when at that price, I would keep that in the box, and you're just looking at it. I don't. Yeah. I have trouble wrapping my brain around that.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, especially since it's a licensed character. Yeah. It's not just Freddy Funko. As I'm perfectly fine with some of those their own mascots being that kind of limited edition thing, but it is what it is. On the flip side, what's the cheapest toy you bought, or what was the best deal you ever got for a figure?
The best deal I ever got for a figure, I mean, in retrospect, now when I bought the Marvel Legends Dragon Man at like $30 or $25 back when that first came out, because the guy who was running the collectible store got a case of those figures in, he's like, "This is a bigger one. I have to charge you more." Like, you know, that was a great deal because that figure now sells carded for like $450. So that was great. But no, you know, I've gotten some great deals in my life. To say I've kept track of all of them, I don't think I'd be able to. But actually, quite recently, I was in it's a vintage toy and video game store. A friend of mine is up near Albany, New York, so I was up in this store. It's called Vortex Video Games, and I traded in some Marvel Legends that I no longer felt like I needed, and he gave me a bunch of store credit and. I got a couple like vintage Masters of the Universe stuff for probably like at the end of the day, maybe I paid $40 to $50 for it, and it's stuff that I know goes for I don't want to say significantly, but more than that. So that felt like a good deal. You know, it's weird to say like what a good deal is anymore because I feel like so many people rely on eBay as to what stuff is worth, and so many of those people don't even check the sold listings. They just look at what the current ones are. So they'll say, this figure's worth $75. You know, here it is on eBay. It's like, that's a listing that's been sitting for 2.5 months. If you go to the sold ones, the last highest sold one was like, $45. Oh, well, I want 70. Well, then I'm not going to pay you. Like it happens so much. And I hate that people use eBay. And I'll admit sometimes if I'm not sure what something is worth, if I'm selling it, I'll go to eBay and then I'll kind of aim like $10 lower than the highest last sold because,
Yeah, but like you said, you are actually doing your research. You're not just going to, like, if I sit here and do a eBay search on Transformers 1986 or 80, no, it was 87, I think, when whenever Rodimus Prime came out, but the original vintage Rodimus Prime, and I'm only looking at whatever the listings are, that's not what the figure is. No, you have to go down, you have to click the sold section and look at what it's sold for, because that's the only way you can then go to somewhere and say, hey, I would like to make you an offer based on this last sold price, etc., etc.
And, going along with that idea too, if you can, I know this doesn't apply to everybody, but if there are any vintage toy stores in your area with trustworthy people or people that you've gotten to know, whatever, go to them. I feel like I'm cutting a PSA here, but
true.
Really, like the vintage toy store people are gonna have, in my opinion and in my experience, generally better deals than people on eBay and even people at conventions. Because when you're at a convention, you got to pay for that table. So sometimes people aren't willing to budge because if they're at something like New York Comic Con being a big one, but even a smaller convention, they want to make back what they paid for that table. So if they haven't hit their $50 a day or $70 a day yet, they're not going to be willing to make any deals. And I'm not trying to vilify anybody who does this. I completely get that. You want to make your money back. Yeah. So but like at a vintage toy store that's there all the time, if they rent or own the space, they're not going to sit here and be like, oh no, this is so marked up. Like they're going to have prices that are a little nicer, I'm going to say. And sometimes they're willing to make some deals with you. Like a friend of mine, same friend actually, upstate from me. He just found a new vintage store that opened up and he went and he was buying a couple things. And the guy was like, oh, tell you what, you're getting all 5 of these. This one's free. The people will do stuff like that, which goes a long way,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, it's all about deal making, and especially the convention stuff, man. Like you said, those people that are there selling their toys, whatever toys they are, whether they're vintage, modern, whether if they're regular or if they're Funkos, they still have to pay for that table. And as long as they've, usually it's like whatever let's just say traditionally Sunday is the last day of most cons. Yep. Usually Sunday, as they're packing up, like that's the time when you go for deals at conventions. Is Sunday when they're packing everything up and they don't want. Oh my god! Like, yeah, I've paid for my table and everything else, but I don't want to go home with all this stock. So if you're willing to take these 20 Funkos for this,
and that's kind of the double-edged sword too, because there are some vendors at cons that are a store. So they might have 30 of this one thing in stock, and it's not going to sell out. And then the last day, maybe they make you a deal. But every now, a lot of them are just independent businesses, whatever. So if by that last day, it's like, oh, I'll get the deal. They might not have that item anymore. And I've experienced both, where like on the last day of a con, I get stuff for cheap. But I've also experienced where they've had it all weekend, and I go Sunday ready to be like, all right, here comes my like $15 less offer. And they're like, oh, it just sold. It's like, oh.
Yeah, it's that kind of sucks. Yeah. So when you do visit toy shows or conventions, what's your game plan? Do you bring a set amount of money? Do you, are you aiming for specific things? Like between, let's say, San Diego, Emerald City, and New York, those are 3 different, very big conventions that maybe not all the same vendors are going to be at all 3. So obviously you're going to have to look for different stuff. What's the Dan game plan for cons?
So I've gotten in the habit of bringing a set amount of money that I don't really want to spend out of, and it's going to vary per show that I go to. Like something like New York Comic Con, I'm going to bring a little more money because there's going to probably be, I might get a sketch from an artist. I might, try to find some kind of collectible thing. And I know it might be a little more expensive, but then I go to smaller conventions and I don't bring as much money. The time of me having any more of a game plan other than this set amount of money has kind of gone away because, I've been collecting for a long time now, and I'm not someone who just willy-nilly is like, oh, you know what? I've decided I need all of this all of a sudden. I have certain little micro collections of things that I've built up over time. And if I'm missing, something from that, I might, keep a photo of it on my phone in like a folder, like, toy to track down or something like that. And if I see it, great. I might look for that at certain booths. Like, let's say I'm looking for like a vintage Masters of the Universe character. If I see a booth that has He-Man stuff, even if it's just accessories, I might go and I might kind of, look at that and see if I can find what I'm looking for. It's really going to depend on each show and what it is I'm looking for. But I used to go in with like a list of like, all right, like here are all the figures I want to find and here are all the comics I want to find. And, but I started feeling defeated if I didn't find it all. So that's why now I'm kind of like, like here's a loose list. If I find it, great. If not, hey, whatever. And I'm only human. There are times that I'll be at a convention and here's something that I never even thought that I wanted or never forgot existed, and I'd see it and I'm like, oh, that's really cool. And that's, a good price. I'll pick that up. Like it happens,
Yeah, absolutely. What modern and/or vintage toy lines are you currently collecting right now? You've mentioned Transformers and He-Man, but what others?
Yeah, so like modern toys, it's definitely the new Transformers and Marvel Legends. That's pretty much the most of modern. I did mention He-Man. I'm very strict with my Masters of the Universe collecting. I love the Evil Horde, so those are the only characters I buy. So if they are any type of Horde member, that's what I'm buying. So I know, like with Masters of the Universe Origins, they just put out Leech and Mantenna, and I know with the Masterverse line, they're putting out like Hordak and Catra as they appeared in the Princess of Power She-Ra cartoon. So like that stuff, I'm just buying the Horde members, so I'm keeping that small again, like another micro collection. When it comes to vintage stuff, I recently got the bug because of this Horde collecting to try to find original 80s Horde members. So I'm trying to find certain members of the Horde and put them in like a very original Masters of the Universe like display. I had a Hordak, a Leech, Grizzlor, and Mantenna from when I was a kid. So I had like some of the big names. So now it's about tracking down some of the other names. But there's that. And then the other thing is I really love the Secret Wars toy line. And I do have a fully complete Secret Wars collection of all the characters, all the play sets, all the vehicles. But I'm a very amateur customizer. I don't sell any of my stuff because it's just for me. I'm not comfortable selling things to people because I don't think I have the best skill out of that some people have. So if I can find like some junker Secret Wars toys or like bad paint or whatever, I'll buy them on the cheap and I'll try to make them into customs of different characters. And so I kind of spend some time doing that. So.
Very cool, very cool. Now, you do know that since you mentioned you're a Horde fan, and you have to have most of every Horde thing, I have to tell you, between Hordak and Grizzlor and Leech, there are plenty of Horde Funko Pops. They even released a Horde Funko Pop Trooper where you could probably buy like 10 of them and have a Horde Troop army.
And knowing I actually have a number of the... I think I have all the Horde Funko Pops. And as I said, like I keep my Funko buying very, very, very limited.
Right.
Because like I grew up... my brothers were big He-Man fans. I was a He-Man fan. Like I could buy all those He-Man Funko Pops. But again, I just really like the Horde. New York Comic Con many, many years ago, when like Pops were getting big. I remember just being in a Funko Pop booth and they had a Hordak and I was like, I like Hordak. I'll buy this Funko Pop. So I did. And now, here we are, however many years later. I think last summer I was in like a Walmart and I was like, oh, look, there's some antenna Funko Pop. Like I could get behind that. And then I was like, how many Horde Funko Pops are there? So I have all the ones that are currently out. But again, now that I'm buying like Horde figures proper, part of me is like, maybe I sell all my Horde Funko Pops. I don't really know if I need them anymore. And that's kind of the way I am with a lot of, and again, I'm not trying to be negative, but with a lot of the Funko Pops I have, like, there'd be one I'd be like, oh, I like Doctor Who. I'll buy Doctor Who and I'll buy the TARDIS. And, I like, I'm trying to think like, Green Arrow, the Arrowverse TV show. So I bought a Green Arrow and I bought a Flash and I bought a Reverse Flash. And now I'm just like kind of looking at them like, they're just kind of space that I could be displaying. I bought a Voltron one and then I bought a combining transforming Voltron. What do I need a little tiny Voltron Funko Pop for? So there might.
I call dibs.
Hey man, you know what? If you want, I'll send you a list of what I got. Anything you want, I'll just send it up to you.
Oh, that's funny. What do you think it is about our generation that causes our childhood toys to mean so much more to us than, for instance, our parents' generation?
I don't know. Part of me thinks that it's the constant reinvention of some of the stuff. Like, my dad, like his favorite cartoon growing up was like Rocky and Bullwinkle. And I was the only reason why I'm aware of Rocky and Bullwinkle was that in the 90s, Nickelodeon had it on in the afternoon. So I'd get home from school, I'd watch Rocky and Bullwinkle, I'd watch it on the weekends, and my dad would like double, he did like a double take, and he was like, "This was my cartoon. How are you watching that?" But aside from like another movie or two and maybe an animated series, I'm not even sure. Rocky and Bullwinkle was never really reinvented. Like, how are you going to change those characters? How can you make them fun and interesting? Whereas our stuff is reinvented. Like, He-Man alone, I apologize for always going to him. But, like there was the 80s Masters of the Universe, and there was the New Adventures in the early 90s, which flopped. And then He-Man was gone for a while. But then the 2000X series, like, that is my favorite bit of He-Man television. Like, that's awesome. And then, now there are 2 Netflix shows with He-Man. So He-Man's constantly being reinvented. Thundercats has been reinvented. And sort of, and then there's been, just like nostalgia lines. I was in a Walmart the other day and they have those new McFarlane DC figures that are on the superpower cards. So, if you were a superpowers collector, if you have any faintest memory of that, you might see that Darkseid or that Batman or that Superman or whoever else is in that line, Green Lantern. And you might say, like, now maybe you're a parent. Oh man, I'll get this for my kid. It'll be like the toys I had when I was a kid, or it might just be like, oh man, like I want this to relive my childhood. I like, my parents like Howdy Doody or whatever. Like there was never like a Howdy Doody like movie universe or action figure universe that they could relive their childhood with. So I feel like it's just with us they kept pushing that nostalgia. G.I. Joe, Transformers, and Yeah, I also feel like part of our generation, and by all means, let me know what you think on this, but I feel like part of our generation wants to hold on to that stuff to maybe remind you of the simpler times when you were a kid, things like that. When my parents were kids, like they were kids and then they grew up and that was it. Like I don't feel like they ever felt like they had to hold on to their childhood, where a lot of us really, especially current collectors, like you never wanted to let go.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, usually the snarky answer to the question is, well, our parents didn't have all these toys. Yeah. Our parents only had going to school, playing outside, playing with your friends. Whereas, let's say late 70s, all throughout the 90s, it's like, stay inside, play your video games, play with your toys, have your friends over, but heaven forbid you go outside and be in front of that evil sun god thing or whatever it is. Yes, my mom did always, and I was an outside kid as much as I was more of an inside kid than I was an outside kid, but I still, as an only child, I still kicked the soccer ball up against the garage every day. I still went out and tried to play softball or baseball or whatever, field hockey, whatever, every time I could, as long as it wasn't winter in Massachusetts, you could kind of do that.
Yeah. Yeah, and
kind of thing.
I grew up in a cul-de-sac, and every family in the cul-de-sac on the street had kids, and we were all around the same age, so we were outside all the time. But on those rainy days we weren't. You'd be inside playing with your toys, or at night.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like, so it isn't like the '80s generation wasn't outside. It's just that our parents and grandparents and people before us, they didn't have all of this awesomeness that we have had over the last almost 30, 40 years. This is what it is. What is your motivation for purchasing toys? To display, play, fiddle? Describe your collecting style. Are you more of a completionist, storyteller, a cherry picker, or otherwise?
So it's definitely for display and a little bit of fiddling. When it comes to like my motivation, if I'm a completionist or not, there was a time that collect 'em all mentality was, ingrained in me. And because all the figures you used to buy at the back of the box, collect them all and show you nice shots of all the upcoming figures and stuff. And this is pre-internet. So you'd walk into a KB or a Toys R Us and you'd see a character you hadn't seen before. And the first thing I would do would be to look on the back of the package to see what other new characters I didn't know about, and then kind of scour the shelves. Like, oh, there's this guy. Hang on. Do I see this guy? And you're like frantically look because you get all excited. So yeah, like I used to be the collect 'em all. I wanted every figure. Marvel Legends and Transformers are both what broke that for me. Marvel Legends at some point, like when I started buying them, they were $10 each. Then they went up to $15. Then they hovered around $20 for a while. Now they're like $25 each. And if I'm looking at a full wave of 7 figures, that's over $200. And sometimes I just don't want every figure in there, and like they get you with the Build-A-Figures. It happens all the time, for me at least. Like, there's an upcoming Avengers wave. By the time this airs, it's probably out with the controller as the Build-A-Figure. And I didn't want everybody in the wave. And luckily someone is hooking me up with a piece from one of the characters I didn't want. So hopefully I'll have a complete controller. But, it's just like, when they incentivize getting things, it's you want to get them all, but at some point you just can't afford it. And then when it comes to Transformers, they've been really, I've been really lucky that in my recollecting of Transformers, which started in the mid 2000s, they've stuck to a lot of the Generation 1 characters. And those are the characters that I really identify with. So like now they're putting out like characters from the Cybertron trilogy, from the Armada show, from Beast Wars. And I have no problem with those shows, but those aren't the ones that I want to collect. So like, I'm not going to sit here and buy every Transformer just to have it. Like, there's a new Voyager class Starscream coming out, and he's how he looked in the Armada cartoon. I have no problem with Armada, but it's not a Starscream I need to have. So like, I'm not going to buy it just to buy it. I'm going to buy it because I actually want to have that on my shelf. And in that particular case of this, Starscream, I don't need it on my shelf. So.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing with these franchises and intellectual properties that have been around for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 decades, because we will get to a point where at some point when I've become even more of an old man than I already am, I'll be talking like this and I'll be like, oh my God, it's about to celebrate 60 years of Transformers. Like, at some point in those, at this point, almost 4 decades, there's something in the brand for everybody, and not everything has to be for everybody. Right. Like, no one is putting a gun to any of our heads saying, you must buy all the toys no matter what. Like, that's just not how that's just not how things work.
Right. And so, I got a friend, like, at San Diego Comic-Con this year, they announced a new Transformers cartoon show. It's coming to Paramount Plus. It's produced by Nickelodeon. And, a friend of mine was like, aren't you mad? It looks like it's for kids. And I was like, well, A, the brand's always been for kids. We've just never let go. But B, like, no, I'm not mad. I'm like, because if anything, like, I'll check the show out. If I don't like it, I don't like it. I'm not going to, hit my chest about it and, make angry Twitter posts about it. But, I just, again, like, I don't have to buy these figures. Like, someone might be into it. That'll be cool. I got a niece and nephews. Maybe they'll be into it. And maybe that'll be, their favorite Transformers. And that's great. And I'll talk about it with them. And if they want to play with their Transformers when I come over, like, yeah, that's fine. I'll get on the floor. I'll play with Transformers with you. But I don't have to have it all. And I can accept when things change. And even recently, and I know this might be controversial, there was that Thundercats Roar show. I checked out a couple episodes. It was silly. I didn't love it.
I watched one episode and I was like, nope,
and that's the thing. That's perfectly fine. But all these people were like, oh, you're destroying my childhood. Like, no, the original show still exists. It's on friggin' Hulu, for Christ's sake. Like, don't sit here and be like, you're ruining everything. Because maybe some little kid is going to discover Thundercats that way. And maybe they'll really enjoy the show. So I get so sick of these people who have, and that friend who I mentioned for this new Transformer show, he was the same way. Like, the preview came out and he was like, LOL, this is crap. I'll bet you'll hate it. And I was like, why do you take pleasure in me, like, wanting, like, I'm not someone who comes off like, oh, I hate this and I want everyone to know. Like, that's not my personality. So it's like, why do you think I always have to hate something? Like, I can just be indifferent. I can just not care, Yeah,
exactly. And that's where I am now. Like, if I see something that I don't like, okay, maybe I don't like it based off of and again, for me, and I say this every single I've said this in every single podcast I've ever recorded when it gets around to this kind of discussion for the last 14 years. Trailers, commercials, they're supposed to be advertisements to either get us to like it or to show us that, hey, maybe this isn't for us. That's the whole point. But it doesn't mean, so for me, the way I look at, like, I'll take Motu because it's the easiest, and then I'll go into a more in-depth thing here in a second. Masters of the Universe, 83 started with Filmation. In the 90s, you had New Adventures. As you've already said, 2002, we had the Mike Young series, and then we didn't have anything up until the Netflix She-Ra show, and now we have the Kevin Smith version and in my personal opinion, the better CGI version, because I personally feel, and again, this is something I've said in every podcast recently, Filmation to us in the 80s is to what I personally think the CGI version of He-Man now is to what kids our age then are now. So basically, the CGI version is the one you want your kids to be growing up on now, like we grew up on the Filmation one. With Transformers and Turtles, it's more of a Transformers specifically, but Turtles, it's more of a what's going on in this era of animation?
Right.
Like the 80s, obviously, you had that traditional standard, not traditional, but that more, 2D style, cell animation stuff. 2003, you had all of that. You've got, what are let's see, 2003, what was that? 2012, the first new Nickelodeon show. And now you've got Rise of the TMNT. Right. I saw the current movie that they put out, but when I first saw the actual animation style for the show, I was like, nearly almost 30 years, 40 plus years of Turtles, I can safely say there's plenty of other Turtles things for me. This animation style for the Rise of the TMNT is not for me, so I'm just going to let people enjoy it if they enjoy it. I'm not going to pay any attention to it. It's not for me.
Yeah, and that's the best way to do it.
Good. Yeah, and the deeper part of that is Transformers. For the 40 years the franchise has been around almost, it is, pun intended, constantly transforming and changing.
Absolutely.
You got G1. Technically, there is no G2 cartoon other than that opening animation because that was just
rehashes of G1.
But whatever. So you got G1, you got Beast Wars, you got Beast Machines. You got
the whole Unicron trilogy. You got
the whole Unicron trilogy. You got
RID.
Prime. You got animated.
There's so much.
You have all these. All of these might have some similar aspects to the original. Like animated is the perfect example. It was kind of a love letter to the original G. At least the first couple episodes where they were leaving the planet and all that. And it was different, but it was still, you could still see the imprint of G1 on the show, kind of thing. And it's constantly changing. It's I'm interested in checking out the EarthSparks show. That's fine. I'll check it. I run this show. I help run another Transformers podcast, so I kind of have to at least check it out. But yeah, no, like these people that just like, oh my God, I can't believe that, it's not the end of the world. There's still the past 40 years of content that you can go check out and find something you like.
Exactly. And because, the truth of the matter, too, is for any of these franchises, if you were telling the same stories about the same characters for the past 30-some-odd years, even you, as a perceived diehard fan, would get bored. Like, if I was watching Optimus Prime fight the Decepticons every week since 1984... eventually, you wouldn't care. How many stories can you tell? So that's why, other entertainment, whether it be comics or a new series or a movie, they try to tell a different story while keeping the core ideas in check because that's what they got to do, Yeah,
and that's going to come into question down the line here when it comes to the toy companies. Okay. But next up, you mentioned you have nieces and nephews, so these next two are going to be interesting. Have you ever purchased a toy for a child with the ulterior motive of playing with it yourself?
Not yet. The stuff that I've given my niece and nephews, it is solely for them. My youngest nephew, he's still at that age where when and they don't live close, I have to travel to see him. So when I do get to see him, he might kind of excitedly be like, "Here's what you got me! Isn't it so cool?" And then I get to kind of futz with it, and it's like, "Oh yeah, that is neat. I'm glad you like it." But I haven't bought anything for them, so I could be like, "Oh, I hope I can play with it too." I've definitely growing up, especially in college. I would give a friend a video game for her birthday, knowing that it was multiplayer, in hopes that they'd be like, "Hey, we should all come over and play this game." And I'd be like, "Oh yeah, sounds like a great idea,"
Yep. Yeah, it's so funny, and that question always reminds me of the times that parents or uncles or whatever, "Oh, here you go," but secretly, if you want to let me check that, it's kind of like the whole Halloween candy thing. Here, let me make sure the candy's okay before you play with it, kind of thing. So, on the flip side of that, have you ever purchased a vintage toy for a child because you thought it would be fun based on your own preferences?
Have I? I don't think I have. I know, recently for my nephew's birthday, he got in Godzilla. So my sister-in-law was like, "Oh, he made an Amazon wish list," and one of them was I forget the company that makes it, but those big rubber Godzilla figures that maybe only the hands and the head might move or something. So he wanted one of them. So those were things that I remember seeing forever. So I was like, I will happily buy this vintage thing for my nephew, somewhat vintagey thing for my nephew. And he loves it. Apparently he stomps around the house with it and, roars in everyone's face. So it's adorable. I have yet to actually see him in action doing that, but yeah. But so like again, if it's gonna make him happy, great. Like if one of my nephews or my niece turned around and said like, I want a G1 Optimus Prime, like I know my brothers would immediately be like, yo, can you get on this? So let me make it happen. Like I'd find a way to work that out, even if it's a reissue or something. But yeah.
I'm the same way. I have all these nieces and not nieces and nephews. I have all these cousins and things, and they've had kids over the years, and most of their kids are growing up now. I think one of them just graduated high school. Oh God, I'm old. So anyway, but yeah, I mean, if I had like my youngest cousin Cassie, she and her husband just had their fifth child. I don't remember. They finally had a son after like 3 girls. So I'm like, ooh, a new mold to mind when it comes to Transformers. And they live up in Massachusetts and I'm here in Indiana. But like, if I was going to send that kid one thing to impress upon them, G1 Astro Train, it's got most. I mean, yes, there's plastic in this thing, but like I'm holding it right now. This black piece on it, that's the die-cast part. That's the metal part. It's like, because die-cast construction, it's a lost art.
Oh, yeah.
So, but yeah, no, absolutely. So you kind of already answered question 31, so I think we can kind of skip this one, but I'll ask it anyway. You said you were kind of bad at it, so you don't do it. Do you do any toy modifications or customs?
I mean, I do. I really do, but it's all for my own purposes.
Okay.
Like there are people.
I don't mean to insult you if you say you want.
No, not an insult. No, not at all. No, it's all for my own stuff. I got a friend who I kind of got him into customizing, and he's just very talented. He's like naturally talented at it. So now he's selling his stuff, via Instagram and. People contact him about making custom G.I. Joes and stuff. And I'm glad that that's working out for him. My stuff, I make it mostly because I don't have an official representation of that character yet. And it's just for my own display. I rarely will post about my customs on social media, more so on my Instagram than anything. But I don't love posting about it. I've never had anyone coming at me being like, this sucks and you should stop. Every customizer I've ever talked to has been like, hey, that's great. Your technique is improving, blah, 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 whatever. My friends who I send pictures to, they're very supportive of it. My wife is very supportive of it. But yeah, it's more just for my own pleasure. I would never go and try to sell it unless somebody like really loved what I did. And in that case, I'd probably sell them the thing I made. I wouldn't be like, okay, yeah, let me remake this for you. I'd be like, just take this one and I'll make another one,
Yeah, exactly. All right, here's that ultimate question when it comes to toy companies. Do you think toy companies should specifically have adult collector toys, child toys, or find a way to mix both?
I think they're already doing that mix both.
Yeah.
Because you look at something like Hasbro, and I'll say Marvel just for the hell of it. Marvel Legends now, they're going for $25 a pop. And when they do these special edition ones, like the Spider-Man 60th anniversary or whatever year we're up to, they're like $30 each. I'm not a parent, so I can't say that I wouldn't want to spend $25 on my kid if it makes them happy. But I feel like that's a harder price tag to swallow than those like open package $10 ones that are going to have 5 to 7 points of articulation and is meant to be a played with child's toy. At the end of the day, I don't think the adult collectors are the only collectors. I think a lot of it is still meant for kids. Star Wars has a kids line. Power Rangers has a kids line. They all have kids lines. Jurassic Park has a kids line. Any property you can think of, there's probably some kind of kids equivalent. So, I feel like every company is doing a good balance of it. Of course, companies like NECA, they're not putting out kids stuff.
No, and there are specific companies that are specifically for adults. I mean, between NECA and some of the Super 7 stuff that Super 7 is doing, like anything that uses a in their toy packaging as their line of the Ultimates. The Ultimates is not for kids. Like that's for us from Super 7 or
now
I think NECA, the biggest example I can probably say is the coming out of their shells stage set that they did for the Turtles show thing. But yeah,
but that also means too. So like, at the end of the day, you might buy your kid the new Transformer that came out or something. And there are simpler Transformers for kids and there are more complex ones. But like, something like a HasLab, you're not dropping that much money for a kid.
Oh, no.
Unless you really love your kid and they're going to be super careful. But, I feel like a kid can find a good toy representation of anything they want. I talked about Godzilla before. Like, really anything. Like, short of a kid coming up to me and being like, I want a toy of The Exorcist. Like, I don't know where I'd find that for you that isn't going to give your parents nightmares as well as you. So, I feel like for the most part, companies do, the major companies, your Mattel, your Hasbro, your Playmates, they're doing a good job of making sure kids and adults have something to collect. And then, like we said, there are, Super 7 NECA that is aiming at just adults,
Yeah, absolutely. And I should not be surprised at this. There are 2 Exorcist toys that Funko has done. I should not be surprised at this.
Funko, they do everything. So.
No, I know. But I was just curious to see what, and they have a pop of Regan and they have a mystery mini of Regan. But, it is what it is. All right. Do you have a my parents got rid of my toys story?
I'm lucky to, well, sort of, but not really. So basically what happened was, I have 2 older brothers and, a lot of my toys as a kid, I got from them. Like they'd be done with it. It was like the hand me down of toys, now you can play with it.
Right. Yeah.
In my parents' basement still, all of mine and my brother's Ninja Turtles are there. All of their G.I. Joes are there and the few that I had. But at one point, my mom decided, because all of their toys were in the basement. Like, I always held on to my Marvel and Transformer stuff. That was always in my bedroom, in my closet, in my bedroom closet. But at some point, I remember my mom being like, there are too many toys down here. You need to sell these. And, my mom's church or my aunt's church was doing, this big, garage sale, yard sale type thing. Mm-hmm. So what my mom told me was, she was like, pick out all the stuff you don't want, bring it to the sale, and you can keep whatever money you sell. And I forget if my brothers were in high school or I think they were in high school at the time. So they were like, we don't want to do this. We want to go spend this Saturday with our friends. And I was like, okay, I'll come. So we had in there Visionaries and Supernaturals and just some random 80s, early 90s toy lines that we would maybe only have 2 or 3 characters from. Brave Star was one of them, just came to mind. And so I went to this yard sale thing, garage sale thing. It was indoors. It was in the youth center or whatever. And my mom and my aunt had all these, quote unquote antique dishes and costume jewelry and whatever. And I had this table full of toys. And and the only reason why I sold all of it there was because my mom was like, you have to sell this. So I sold it. And as a kid in middle school, I think I made $100. And when you're in middle school at the time, $100 felt like $1 million. I was going to go to KB. Yeah. They used to do 3 Marvel figures for $10. I was going to go there with $100 and get 30 figure or however many figures. I was so ready to go. And my mom and my aunt sold nothing because nobody was the kids weren't coming up with their parents to look at dishes and jewelry. They were coming up to be like, this is a cool toy. I want this. So it's I know the stories where people were like, my mom just took it and threw it in the garbage, and I never knew until I came back from summer vacation or something. They never did anything like that for me. Mine's kind of the happy ending of well, I got to sell it on my own terms and things like that. The one thing that my mom tried to make me get rid of, and I would constantly hide them, and I'm glad I did, because I didn't know their full origins until I was older, was my Battle Beasts. We had a tin full of Battle Beasts. And my mom would always be like, you don't need these things. And I really dug them, and I'd always hold on to them. And then when I found out, like, I would hide them in my room. I'd like put them underneath like my underwear or something. Like like the kid who's hiding the Playboy, you know, I'm hiding Battle Beasts under my socks. But so I would always hide them when my mom would be like, you should get rid of them. So and then I eventually came to find out that they were in Japan part of the Transformers toy line, technically. So I have a complete American Battle Beast collection. I haven't gotten into Laser Beast.
Wow.
And that, like, and I have the vehicles, the play sets, like that. That was like a crown achievement that it took me a couple years to build. And that they don't all have their weapons, but I have every character. But so like that was something that I'm glad that I never was forced to get rid of, because now like my mom will come over and, you know, she'll come into my basement where I have all my stuff. And she'll be like, "Oh, you kept these Battle Beasts after all these years, huh?" And I'm like, "Yeah, you trying to get rid of them."
Yeah, and again, my story never changes, and I only say it every episode because for the guest's edification, because I don't ever always think everyone's going to listen to my actual episode that I did, but my dad. So I come from divorced parents. My parents divorced in 1982 when I was 2 years old. It is what it is. Nothing I can do about it then. Nothing I can do about it now. One of them's gone anyway, so it doesn't really matter. So at the time, because I came from divorced parents, I would only have 1, 2, or 3 of the Masters of the Universe bad guys at my. Like, I would have a Skeletor and like maybe 1 or 2 other henchmen. But I would have all the other. Basically, you know, I would have 10 heroes to 3 villains. My dad's house in Rhode Island, I would have all the villains with like 3 heroes. So like Tila is kind of SOL. She's hanging. Yeah. Castle Grayskull was at my mom's house. Snake Mountain was at my dad's house.
Oh man.
I had Grayskull and I had Snake Mountain. Grayskull lasted about 30 years until bugs infected it in one of my apartments. Yeah, it is. That's a whole other thing. But yeah, no. So, you know, by 1986, my dad. By the time I was 6 years old, my dad was like, "Yeah, you're too old for toys." I sold them all. I'm just like, what?
Yeah.
So yeah, it is what it is. Right now, do you feel like you are coming to an end of your active toy collecting? If so, what has signified this phase for you? Was there ever a moment when you were completely done with toys altogether?
There's never been a moment where I've been completely done. I have, and this is something I haven't really told a lot of people, so what a better way to do it than on a podcast. But I have been thinking a lot about, I don't want to say completely getting out, but definitely cutting down on stuff. And I've been cutting down, you know, to begin with. But part of me was kind of afraid to lose my own identity if I stop collecting, because it's not the centerpiece of my life, but it is a big part of my life. You know, my own radio show, I talk about the collectibles that have been announced, and I'm excited about them, so I talk about them because I'm planning on buying some of them. So it is a big part of me. And recently, one of my best friends got rid of all of his Marvel Legends. Just like, you know, he was going to cut down, and then he was like, screw it, I'm getting rid of everything. And part of me was like, well, if you do that, like, what am I going to talk to you about? Not that our friendship was built on Marvel Legends, but, you know, like well, what do I have to say now? You know, there's plenty to say. He's one of my best friends for a reason. But, like, it's still, like, he'll still look at the news. So, like, you know, recently, as of this recording, they announced a Marvel Legends, like, vintage card Ghost Rider, like, on the 90s Toy Biz Ghost Rider, you know, card back. And, like, when they announced it, he texted me to be like, did you see this? So here he is, someone who's not collecting Marvel Legends anymore, and he's still like, that looks really cool. Like, I'm not going to buy it, but I know you like Ghost Rider. So, like, I can still talk to him about it. So that's good. Yeah. But, like, yeah, I've never been done, but I've definitely been at the point where it's like, maybe I don't need this character, or maybe I don't need this section of characters. And, you know, I look at my own display in my basement for my... Marvel seems to be the one that I'm always kind of going back and forth on. I look at that, and I have a number of dedicated shelves to mutants, to X-Men. And then I have like a couple shelves of Spider-Man, but then there's like one Avengers shelf and one Avengers bad guy shelf. And part of me is like, maybe I don't need to collect Avengers characters anymore. Like maybe I'm okay with, even if I got rid of most of these, maybe I'd feel okay. Like keep a Hulk, a Thor, Captain America, Iron Man, and like Wasp, Ant-Man, and Hawkeye or something. And maybe I'd just be fine with that. Like I definitely look at it often as being like, I don't know if I need all this anymore. Maybe I can let go of some of it. And I keep saying I have cut back in ways. There are times where Marvel will be like, hey, this is coming out. And I'm like, that's nice. I don't need it,
Mm-hmm.
So, Transformers I have a harder time thinking of letting go of. Every time Hasbro's like, here's the next wave, I'm never looking at it like, I don't really need any of them. I'm like, all right, I don't need that Beast Wars one. The rest I need,
Yep.
So.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. What is something that does not have a toy of it you'd love to have in toy form?
God, that's a tough question because I feel like I'm getting damn near everything I'd ever want at this point.
Yeah. In 2022, that question, while it's a good question, it just doesn't seem like it's relevant anymore. Because even though they may not give us specifically what we like, again, I mentioned earlier about the Kingdom Commander class Rodimus. Mm-hmm. Technically, that is everything I wanted 30 years ago when I had the original Rodimus toy. But some of the Transformer stuff, like, maybe it's not painted as much as it should be, or maybe they can't go by this, or maybe they can't do this, or maybe they couldn't fit this in to get it at a certain price point kind of thing. So this question does feel I'm sure there's plenty of things.
And I'm sure if I sat here for like 2 hours really hemming and hawing about it, I'd give you an answer. My most recent one would have been I would have loved an official Molten Man figure. I had a custom that I made, and then Hasbro on the last live stream that they did for Marvel Legends was like, here's a Spider-Man 5-pack with Molten Man. And I'm like, well, I don't want anyone in that 5-pack except Molten Man.
Molten Man.
So I'm not buying the 5-pack. I'm hoping I can find Molten Man on the cheap. But it's just I especially with Marvel Legends, like I can't really think of too many characters I want. Like I take that back. Feral from X-Force, I really want her. I think that's like the last X-Force member I need. And and maybe he had a toy in the old Toy Biz pre-Legends days, but there was an X-Factor guy named Random. I would love an official Random figure and maybe a Wolfsbane in her X-Factor uniform. And then I think we're still waiting on Rachel Summers Phoenix from Excalibur. So there are a couple people to round out my 90s X teams, but otherwise, like, I have all the big names. I could, of course, name some obscure character that 5 people are going to know, but but if we're talking things that would appeal to like an entire audience, I feel like those are kind of where we're at. So,
yeah. Now that 5-pack, besides Molten Man, who's in it?
Oh God, the 5-pack is it's the Human Fly, Molten Man, Razor Beast, who looks cool, but I don't know where I'd stick him on a shelf. They used the Ultimate Spider-Man, like that teenage Spider-Man body, to do an Ultimate black costume Spider-Man. So the way that was drawn, it had like more of like a purple sheen to it. So that's how the figure's painted. And then the last figure in it is Silvermane on that Ultimate Beetle body, but it's all painted in gray with like a Silvermane head, which is literally a custom that I made a couple years ago. I took an Ultron from like a Target 3-pack and stuck the Silvermane head that came with like the race car that Shocker had, stuck that on it. And I was like, now I have a Silvermane. And it's the exact thing that I made a custom of. So I was like, okay, way to go, Hasbro.
That's
like,
awesome.
Stop stalking my Instagram.
Yeah, for me, I'll say this, and I say this every time because I think a lot of the Funko fans know this, but Funko's tagline is, everyone is a fan of something. Well, that is true, and they have a lot of licenses. The one license they have yet to crack is that magical question mark box. So yeah, if we could get Nintendo Funko Pops, that would be great. The only other thing I think I would personally want, like I would actively like step on people to get, and this is so stupid and silly, is more Batman Beyond Funko Pops, because the only things we have currently are Batman Beyond suits. We have the classic, the original one that came out years and years and years ago. It was Funko number 39. We have the new Funko Shop one with him crouching. We have the Fugitive Toys one with him having glowing red eyes. And what was the other one? Oh, the metallic one that came with the DVD set if you bought it at a certain time when the Blu-ray Batman Beyond DVD. So there are 4 Batman Beyond Pops, but they're all of Terry in the suit, the Batman Beyond suit. Like, I want Max, I want Dana, I want Bruce, Bruce.
Even all the villains that he has, too.
Well, yeah, absolutely. But, like, can you imagine an old Bruce Wayne, Bruce Timm style, Kevin Conroy, old Bruce, and they do this with other characters. They have, like, Bob Ross is a perfect example. Bob Ross, various versions of him have, like, the squirrel or the raccoon, or they... Even Back to the Future, Doc Brown. I have a Doc Brown Loot Crate exclusive Funko Pop around here somewhere, or maybe it's in storage, where it's him and Einstein next to each other. So they've done these little, like, I want old Bruce with Ace, or Terry with Ace. Like, I would love to have a Terry McGinnis Funko Pop that is him out of the suit, kind of. That would be really, really cool.
Yeah, I get that.
So... Okay, so this one's a little different, not in toy form, but what is a toy that you would love to have scaled up and functional for real people? Like, it could work in the real world.
I mean, I can't say Megatron because that would be controversial, and I feel like the G1 one, you can't bring a G1 Megatron onto an airplane for reasons. So, no, what would I like to see scaled up into like a real world form? Geez, that's a great question. Hasbro's been really good about doing like more and more role play items recently. So you have like the Tesseract, and you have Captain America's shield and Thor's various hammers and stuff. I think it would be really neat if they have like the Iron Man helmet, but I think it'd be kind of neat if they would do like maybe more of the Iron Man suit, like at the very least like repulsor gauntlets, like a glove you could wear. That, I don't want it to fire anything. I don't want anyone to get hurt, but could like light up and make the noises from the movies and things like that.
Don't they have that?
Oh,
though?
Do they?
I mean,
I know there are like cloth children's ones. I'm talking like a full on like moving armor pieces.
Yeah.
Because I have like the Infinity Gauntlet. Like that thing's awesome. But I feel like that's where I'm at. I feel like prop replica, like weaponry, things like that would be a logical step to scale up. I can't say I wish I had a in-scale X-Wing. Like, where am I going to park an X-Wing, Like, I'd love to have an AT-AT to get to work too, But, I feel like there's some things that are highly impractical. I'd love to have an Optimus Prime truck that could transform, but let's be honest, that's not going to happen,
Well, okay, it's not upscaled to be functional in the real world, but I mean, RoboSen is kind of doing that because it's an. I know, but like, if they can do that, can you imagine? Oh God, I can't even. Yikes! Yeah, Transformers in the real world would not be good.
No,
not at all. How has your wife dealt with your collection?
She's fine with it. It was something that I was very upfront and open about when we started dating. That like, this is who I am, this is what I'm into, and she never had any problem with it. She's very fine with it. That being said, prior to my wife, I've definitely dated women who were, I don't want to say weirded out by it, but they weren't as comfortable with it. Like. One of my friends, another one of my really good friends, his girlfriend at the time had a friend that she wanted to fix me up with. And like their bright idea one time was like, let's go to Walmart and walk around. Cause that's what we did when I was in college. It was a 24-hour Walmart. So we went to Walmart and like we walked into the toy section and a brand new wave of Marvel Legends was there. So I was like, so in front of this girl who like they're trying to fix me up with, I'm like buying 3 action figures and she's like, "What are you doing with those?" And I was like, "Buying them." Duh. No, I was like buying them, and she's like, "To play with?" And I was like, "No, I just collect them. Like, I have a display shelf, I put them on, and it's a hobby." And she was like, "Oh, don't you think you're old for that?" And I was like, "No, it's just what I'm into." And like, needless to say, that relationship never took off. Like, nothing ever happened from it. But yeah, there have definitely been
probably a good thing.
Yeah. And no ill will towards any of these people. I also feel like the past like 12-ish years, it's gotten a little more accepted because of the Marvel movies getting so big and stuff. So now someone might not question it as much as long as it was like a character they knew from a movie. But I've dated women who were very great with it and were totally into it, would go to toy shows with me to help me find stuff. And I've dated women who just were like, well, this is kind of weird. And, those relationships didn't work. As I said, my wife is fine with it. My display area is my basement and she's fine. It's not like, this tiny little damp basement. Like I finished it all nice and stuff. So, she's fine with it. And my wife herself collects some stuff. Like I'm sitting in my living room recording today and like she has like a 12-inch electronic Kylo Ren next to the TV that, you move his arm and he'll talk. She's got on top of our bookcases a couple Funko Pops, like Star Wars Funko Pops. My wife likes Star Wars, just as much as I do. So to say that, she doesn't have any interest would be a lie too. She doesn't collect quite like I do, but she has her own stuff too,
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, the reason why this is on here is mostly for those people that I have on the show that are actually either with someone or, are married and whatever else. But it's just one of those things where, again, about a decade ago or so, like we were having this whole thing of, oh my God, people need to like there was a whole A&E. Like, look, I like certain things on A&E. A&E in general, I don't have a problem with the network, but you're going to put on a show and try to get into the toy business by doing something called, like, yes, drug intervention, alcoholic intervention. Yeah. Yes, I understand that stuff. But you're going to put a show on the air called Collection Intervention, and you're basically going to spring this on people like they have problems?
Yeah.
Like, that show just rubbed me all kinds of wrong. And half the time, the episodes were like, I'm going to sell this off, or I'm going to sell this off, and I'm just like, oh my God, society, like, what the hell?
Yeah, and I mean, and to that extent, too, leading up to my marriage, my wife and I were living in an apartment together, and in the apartment, it was a 2-bedroom apartment. The second bedroom was like a guest room / like office space. So, really, I had a shelf in our main bedroom that I had my Marvel Legends on. And I had a bookcase in the living room that I had some Transformers on. And that was really all I could display at the time. Everything else was in storage at my parents' house. Yeah. And my wife was fine with it. And like she would have friends who would come over and like they'd kind of be like, "Oh, this is his stuff." And then they'd be like, "Well, when you get married, it won't be there anymore." And my wife would be like, "Why? Where's it going to go?" And they're like, "Oh, you're going to let him display this after you're married?" And like she knew how much it pissed me off. And it took everything I had to not respond to some of those comments. But she would squash that. And like, God bless her. She would just be like, listen, like, just because I'm marrying him doesn't mean he has to stop buying this stuff. Like, this is his interest. This is what he's into. Like, you're with the guy who likes beer and football. When you get married, did you make him stop drinking and watch tennis instead? No? Then fuck off. Like, sorry, I don't mean to,
No. I absolutely. It's like, I don't, like... And seriously, make him stop drinking and watch tennis? I'd have to drink more if I was watching tennis. And I don't drink. Like, I don't drink. Like, I have drank in my lifetime, but I am not a drinker. I don't drink.
But like, that's the thing. I feel like some of these people thought, and for the most part, I like all my wife's friends, but I feel like some of them thought that like by me getting married, I was going to start doing like more man stuff. And I'm like, so what? Become an alcoholic? Like that's what you would rather have me do? Like,
yeah, really.
Oh,
and the same, and it isn't really the same thing with me. But when Karen was still here, when she was still alive, like she knew, like again, it was a point in my life where I'm like everything is out. Like instead of having like this hidden label with all this syrup things that I can't, all these things on like food labels that you can't, all these words on food labels you can't know. I'm like, look, this is who I am up front. This is what I do. This is what I have. This is what, like, there was, again, about 5, 6, 7, maybe 10 years ago, somebody was like, oh, the easiest way for your date to leave you on the first date, tell them you're a podcaster. I'm like, wait, what? Huh? Why? Like, what's the difference between telling them I'm a podcaster or that I work in, like, serious, like, really? Like,
yeah, no.
These whole conceptions of various things have just, thankfully, sort of, most of them have kind of melted away. But the fact that they were even there on any level of anything is just like,
right.
Wow.
And I feel like to maybe cap off this question too, anyone who's going to judge you on the fly based on your interests that are relatively harmless. Like if your interests are like buying guns and hunting people, like you might have some problems.
Wow.
But if your interests are just buying collectible things, whether they be Funko Pops or action figures or DVDs, people who have tons of DVDs and stuff, like it's not offensive. But if they're going to judge you on that, then they're not if they're not willing to get to know you and why you're into that stuff and why that makes you excited, then they're just not worth your time. I've seen people, my own friends, like pine after people, and I've done it too, who just like, they didn't get why I was into comic books. They didn't get why I was into animation. They thought it was weird. And I would spend months chasing these women around. And then finally they'd end up dating someone who was like, your stereotypical like jock or whatever it may have been when I was in college. I'm not trying to take a piss off.
No. Right. Yeah.
It would just be like, why was I wasting my time when I ended up finding people who were, I was just so much better being with because they embraced my interests, Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, that's the thing. Like we like Karen and I had plenty of differing interests, but we also had plenty of things that like, this is so silly and stupid, but so she got me into playing Bingo Blitz, which is a Facebook game, but it's also, you can get it on mobile and whatever else. And since she's passed, I didn't delete the thing. I still kind of play.
Yeah.
I still most of the time I just, collect the daily gifts and then I wait until I can play, like, because the thing with that though, and thing with all mobile games is like, pay to play, pay to win. Like if you yes, you can collect your 84 credits for this one day, but you may only have enough credits to play one round, which is going to be less than a minute and a half of your time. Right. Whereas like if I save up for 3 months, it's like, oh, I have over 2,000 credits. I can play for like 4 hours or whatever it is, whatever. So, she got me into that. I didn't necessarily get her into Funko Pops, but she found plenty of her own character, like, what was it, Drunk Uncle from SNL? There was a pop of that. Again, she was into the Harry Potter stuff, so I would get her like Hermione and other characters and things like that. And, and she had her own little office space in the house that we had and whatever else. And she, displayed her, like, my collection was all in my office.
Right.
My collection was all in my office upstairs. Whereas, the only other Pops in the house really were the ones that were in her office, which was downstairs, which was what the den was or whatever else. So, like, and I mean, I've seen plenty of House Hunter episodes where people have left Pops out, and they don't really, thankfully on House Hunters, they don't really address it, but for those of us looking and we see like, hey, isn't that a Funko Pop on the refrigerator? What's going on here?
Right.
But it's cool. You know what I mean? Like I don't know. It's just, all of these preconceived notions on any issue you can face. I'm going to blanket statement this. Any preconceived notion you have on anything, just drop it. It's not worth it. Get to know the person or get to know whatever it is you need to. Yeah. So moving on. Toy collecting can have its struggles. What is one aspect that you tend to struggle with the most?
What is one aspect I tend to struggle with the most? I think my current thing is being able to tell myself it's okay to not get a figure. As humans, we're social creatures. We want to talk to people. So when they announce a new figure for whatever company, if it's something you're into, even if it's a character you might not love, there have been plenty of times where I'm like, I need this figure because everyone's talking about it on YouTube. Everyone's talking about it on Twitter. I want to be part of the conversation. So it's that fear of missing out. So being able to tell myself it's okay to miss something, that's my biggest struggle, and that happened. Yeah. As I said, I try to stick to G1 Transformers when the Kingdom line was coming out. They put out like a leader class Megatron. And I saw it in Target, and I was like, I'm buying this right now because everyone's saying it's great. And I got it in hand, and I messed around with it, and he's a great figure. But, and I like Beast Wars, but, that's not what brings me excitement. So everybody was like, isn't he great? Isn't he great? And I was like, yeah, he's okay. Anyone want to buy mine? That's kind of what it turned into. And I currently have them on a shelf. I'm like, because I got the Optimus Primal too, so I'm like, all right, I'll keep the 2 leaders from Beast Wars. They can live on my shelf. But it's just that I don't always have to be part of the conversation. I can enjoy something by watching someone else get enjoyment out of it. Like adjusting my mindset to that has been my biggest struggle.
Yeah, absolutely. And see, for me, it was sort of easy because, again, I don't remember if we've said this in this episode or not, but back in 2011, I had to sell off my actual toy collection I had because of finances at the time and whatever else. So from 2011 up until I started this, up until Funko came around, 2011 until it came around to me, 2011, 2016, I didn't, for those 5 years, like you're saying, I can look at a news story and say, "Oh, that's cool," but I don't need it. It's okay. Right. I'm perfectly I'm not gonna die tomorrow if I don't have it. Now, granted, I say that now, and if Funko ever releases Alf in pop form, look out. I'm basically going to devastate everybody. I'm basically going to turn into Devastator because, seriously, if someone told me that, or if someone asked me the whole thing of stopping, I could. Yes, there are still probably plenty of Funko Pops I would want, but I could stop my Funko Pop collecting tomorrow if they announce that they are releasing 80s icon Alf from the show Alf. I'd be good. What is one positive and one negative memory you have with buying toys?
A positive memory, I mean, just any time that I get excited to find something in a store that I wasn't expecting is always a positive memory. But I do remember, I want to say it was December 30th, so it was the day before New Year's Eve. And Toys R Us was still in business. I don't remember what year it was, but they had announced a Cyclonus figure for Transformers. And I was super excited. I couldn't wait to find him. And I was hanging out with my friend. We went to a Toys R Us on a whim. And we walked to where the Transformers are. And there was a Cyclonus on the shelf all by himself. And I was like, this just made, the end of this is the perfect end cap for a year. That made me really happy finding that one.
Yeah,
my worst memory, and I'm kind of an asshole for this story. I'll be honest.
Oh no.
My worst memory was again in a Toys R Us. I had to be in my 20s. I was in the Toys R Us, Transformers or just action figure aisle, and there was a little kid screaming about how he wanted to buy a new toy, as little kids do. And the mother was trying to coax him out. No, we had to get the present for so-and-so's birthday. It's not your turn to get a present, and that's fine parenting in my book. But then this kid was like, the mother said something like, you can't buy an action figure every time you come into the store. So the kid, being a kid, and I'm sure he meant it as innocent as could be, went, well, that man's buying an action figure. And the woman looked at me and then looked back at the kid and she's like, well, there might be something wrong with him. It was a weird comment to make, but it was within earshot because she was only 10 feet away from me.
Yeah.
So I got super pissed and I turned to the woman and I bold-faced lied. And I said, ma'am, hi, I don't mean to be rude. I'm like, but this is actually for a very sick cousin of mine who's in the hospital and might not make it. I said, so if I could make his life just a little bit better by giving him a toy before he passes away, that's why I'm in Toys R Us today. And the woman turned white. And she was like, oh, my God, let me pay for that for you. And I was like, no, that's okay. You've done enough. And she was like, no, I insist. And, like, it was fully for me. So I wasn't going to, like, that's, like, super bad karma, being like, yes, buy this toy for me. So I was like, no, you're okay. I appreciate the offer, but no, thank you. That's not necessary. And I left. And, like, I felt so terrible, that somebody would be like, you're a weirdo for buying toys. Like, maybe I have a kid at home who I'm buying a toy for. You don't know what my story is. But then I kind of felt worse about making like a lie like that. And I'm like, I really hope that like I'm never in a position where I'm buying a toy for someone who might not be making it through. Like, it was kind of a terrible thing to say. And I don't take joy out of that story. Like, so I told some of my friends, we laughed about it, but like, I really don't feel comfortable like I would never do that to someone anymore, because it was one of those things that as soon as I said, I was like, oh, that's regret, you know?
Yeah, but at the time, it's like, you got to come up with a reason.
Oh, yeah, well, I had to come up with a reason to,
you know
to
what
be
I mean?
like, how can I make you feel worse?
Well, okay, but I didn't, I'm like, but you... Like, I wish instead of her, like, and again, this is, hindsight is what it is, but if the kid said, but that man's buying a toy, what the mother should have said was, instead of saying, even if you were still in earshot, instead of saying, oh, well, he must be a weirdo or something, she should have said to her son that man is a man. He is of age. He probably that should have been a teaching moment for her son.
That person can spend their money how they want, something like that.
Exactly, something like that. Instead of
stranger,
and instead of making you have to tell a story that you now feel horrible about. You felt horrible about it then, but you still feel horrible about it after all these years. But it's
I'm chuckling about it, but it's not something that I'm sitting here like.
We're not trying to laugh at this story, folks. We know it was we understand mistakes were made, and there's nothing we can do about it now. But why?
Yeah. So that was probably the worst toy buying.
But I don't.
I also got accused of being a scalper once, which was very awkward.
Oh no!
Yeah, when the Toys R Us version of the Transformers Masterpiece Soundwave came out, I was buying one for myself, and a friend that I had. He was like, I called him up. I was like, yo, you said you were looking for one. There's like 5 on the shelf. Would you like one? And he was like, yeah, if you can spot me, I'll pay you back tomorrow. I was great. So I grabbed 2. And this guy was just like, why are you buying 2, scalper? And I turned around and I went, one for myself, one for my friend. He's like, oh, just got to buy up the whole store. And I was like, no, there's 3
still
more.
3 on the shelf.
And he's like, oh, you're a scalper. They shouldn't sell to you. And I just walked away. I was like, you're insane. I'm walking away. I get to the register, and he friggin' followed me. And he's like telling the cashier, like, don't let him buy 2. He's a scalper. He's a scalper. And finally, like, the manager came out, and he was like, you need to stop abusing our customers. Like, otherwise I'm going to ask you to leave. And then the manager, like, politely was like, what's going on here? And I said, like, listen, like, here's the call-log. I just called my friend and asked him if he wanted this toy, because I know he's looking for it.
While I'm here at the store.
I'm like, I said, if there's a purchase limit, then fine. I'll buy my one. I'll tell him, you got to get to this Toys R Us. But I figured I'd do him the favor. And the manager was like, all right, no, I just wanted to make sure, because, like, this guy was very worked up. And I'm like, yeah, he's screaming at strangers. Do you want to believe him? Like,
yeah, so a scalper, for those that don't know, and after 157 previous episodes, why we have to redefine this in 2022 is beyond me. But a scalper is someone who will go into the store at any length of time and
buy up all of a certain toy and then try to upcharge them on the internet.
Like if you were going to, like, if you, Dan, at that time were going to be like, I'm going to get one for me and my friend, and then I'm going to make a bunch of money off the other 3. Like, if you were going to buy all 5 of them, okay, sure, unless you have a call log between you and your friend and your 3 other nieces, nephews, family members, friends, whatever, like, yeah. But a scalper is someone who will buy up everything. They won't just buy 2.
Right.
Like, you're not making scalp money off of 2. Oh, God. If Hasbro, Marvel Legends, whatever, if you could create any toy, the company gave you the keys to the kingdom, what would you want to create?
Right now, and this is a very easy answer for me, right now it would be a comparable Deathsaurus from Transformers Victory to go with the upcoming HasLab Star Saber.
Very cool.
There we go. That's an easy one.
Yeah. What is the one piece of advice you would give the toy collecting fandom?
Don't start. It will consume your life. No. The best advice I can give, and this is kind of how I try to go through life in general, is, be open-minded. It's perfectly fine to not like something, but if someone's buying something, don't shame them for buying it. And stick within your means. I don't know too many people who have like gone into debt buying toys. I don't know anyone. But, if you only have $60 a month for toys, don't say, oh, I can spend $80 this month and then I'll just spend $40 next month, because you and I both know that that's not going to happen. So stick within your means. And sometimes pre-orders come a lot earlier than expected. It just happened with me with Hasbro Pulse. And I was like, okay, rest of the month I got to pump the brakes. That's what that comes down to. So.
Yep, absolutely. Final question. What is advice you'd give to kids who enjoy toys?
Enjoy them. Enjoy them. Do not let anyone tell you shouldn't enjoy them. I remember when I turned 12, my parents would say oh, well, you're not going to like this stuff when you're 13. And then I'd turn 13 and they'd say, you're not going to like this stuff when you turn 14. And every year it was, you're not gonna. And I did. So, if it's really something you like, be true to yourself. Don't change because someone at school is telling you that now you should like girls and cars. If you like collecting things, be proud of it. Wear it on your sleeve. Maybe don't make it every single conversation you have, but be proud of it. You are who you are and you will be accepted. And, especially for the young kids out there, I don't want to get in a mental health PSA, but you will find your people who are into this like you are. And, it might seem like it's taking forever, but I promise you it will happen. Some of my best friends I didn't meet until I was in college. And the reason why they're my best friends is because they're into collecting, they're into comics, they're into the movies I'm into. And, finding them is one of the best things that ever happened to me.
All right, folks, we are going to take one final ad break, and then we are going to come back to close the show after this.
Hello, all sentient beings. Want the latest on everything going on in the Transformers multiverse? Check out the Transmissions Podcast Network. We've got weekly podcasts covering everything from Alpha Trion to Omega Supreme, from old school G1 all the way up to Cyberverse and beyond. And you don't want to miss Empire of Rust, the world's first and only Transformers live play role-playing game podcast. If you love Transformers, there's something for everyone at transmissionspodcast.com.
Like science fiction? Of course you do, or you wouldn't be listening to the Geekcast Radio Network. Well, the Marku 42's Universe podcast is an award-winning sci-fi radio show that's been around for over 10 years. We cover everything from Doctor Who to the MCU to pop culture and everything in between. A new show drops on Tuesday mornings on the GCRN website and all of the major podcast platforms. So listen to the Marku 42's Universe podcast from the universe and beyond.
Discover a world of vintage and modern toys that's more than meets the eye with the Triple Takeover Toycast.
Hosted by toy writers and photographers Toybox Soapbox, 60 and TF Square 1, this informal and chilled out series of discussions cover everything from vintage Transformers to Mask, Diaclone, Microman and more, be it nostalgic or current.
Whether you're a seasoned collector or a casual robot enthusiast, all are welcome.
Triple Takeover Toycast.
Hi,
I'm Dan, and I'm the host of the Rock Nerd Radio Show, which airs live on HudsonRiverRadio.com every Wednesday evening at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It also gets backed up as a podcast, which you can find on your preferred podcasting platform. Every week on my show, I talk about all kinds of pop culture. I talk about music, I talk about movies, TV, comics, collectibles, and so much more. I also feature a guest on my show periodically, which you might enjoy. I have a couple of special segments on my show, one called the Cover Song of the Week and My Favorite Thing in the World This Week. If you think this sounds cool, check it out sometime. I hope you do.
On the Simplistic Reviews podcast, we talk movies. We talk TV. We talk...
Hello, Julie, what the heck are you doing?
Trying to make our spots sound more exciting by adding explosions.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you could have got the point across with sound effects, not the real thing. Car.
Download this show on iTunes or at simplisticreviews.blogspot.com.
I'm sure your insurance company will cover that.
No, they won't.
No, they probably won't.
All right, folks, that's going to do it for this episode of Toycast. So, as always, I want to thank you for joining us here on Toycast. If you'd like to get in contact with us or leave feedback for the show, there are several ways to do so. Visit the website, geekcastradio.com, where you can listen to and comment on all of our content. Send an email to feedback@geekcastradio.com. You can find us on all the podcatchers, iTunes, Spotify, Apple, whatever, whatever you listen to, whatever you use. Follow us on Twitter at GeekCastRadio for the network, at TFToycast for the show. I am at TFG and Mike. As Dan mentioned, he is at Rock Nerd Radio on Twitter. Become a fan on Facebook. Go to facebook.com/GeekCastRadio Network. You can also check out Toycast, or it might be under TF Toycast over there. I know the overall page is Toycast, but the at thing might be at TF Toycast. Coming up next time, I'm not sure. I never know, folks. It's probably going to be a display case, but I could be wrong. For now, I am TFG and Mike with
Dan from the Rock Nerd Radio Show.
Join us next time, and we'll be talking more toys here on Toycast. All right, folks, we're going to take another ad break. You're going to come... Damn it.